The snow fell in soft, secretive flakes that dissolved on Lyanna Stark's bare fingertips as she stood atop the battlements of Winterfell. It was the first true storm of the season. Thin at first, then fat balanced crystals drifting across the black sky. And she let them settle on her lashes, her lips, the collar of her fur-lined riding cloak. 6 months had passed since the Tower of Joy, since Rhaegar Targaryen's dream died beneath the blinding Dornish dawn, and still there were mornings when she woke confused, fingers searching for phantom bruises, breath sharp with the taste of desert dust. But winter rode after every war, and Lyanna had come home alive. That in the north was miracle enough. Ned said it each dawn when they walked the stone courtyard together. "You are alive, Lya. Alive, alive, alive." Alive, as though if he named the fact aloud, the old gods honor it. She would mock him for the chant if she did not need it herself, if she did not taste in every syllable the iron tang of ghosts. Below, the courtyard glowed gold in the torchlight. Kennel boys hurried with straw bundles. Stable hands shoveled chips of ice from the cobbles. Winterfell hummed like a living beast, preparing for the cold to come. The old masons were repairing a crack in the east wall that Brandon once swore he would mend himself. Her wild, laughing brother, ashes now for 2 full years. Lyanna's breath clouded white as she watched the masons work, sleeves rolled, hammers ringing, and it struck her how the castle endured when the blood that warmed it did not. She was Lady of Winterfell in truth and name. The small folk called her that already, running tongues unfamiliar over the words once meant for her mother, and would have been meant for Catelyn Tully had fate not shifted on a single blade of grass. Ned's betrothal to the Tully girl died with the raven that carried news of Lyanna's rescue, and Catelyn, they said, was promised instead to some river lord cousin. Lyanna did not know whether to pity the girl or envy her, for a life untouched by northern frost, untouched by hauntings. A scuff of boots drew her from her worries. When she turned, Ned stood a respectful few paces away, cowl raised against the wind. His gray eyes were darker under the torch, reflecting the snow sky. "You will freeze up here," he said, managing a small smile. "Come. The fires are laid in the great hall. Maester Luwin fears a chill will undo all Lyanna Stark's hard-won healing." "Maester Luwin would have me swaddled like a babe," she answered, but let her brother draw her arm through his. His touch was gentle. He had learned gentleness. A hard lesson, on the corpse-strewn road south. Always gentle now, as though the world were brittle ice. They moved toward the stairway, the torches hissing above. "You coddle me worse than Benjen." "Benjen coddles no one," Ned said, and the words curled from him as fog. "He means to ride again for the wall in 3 days. The old Lord Commander has lost another ranger, and my brother will not be still." "Benjen was never still, even in the cradle," Lyanna replied. Memory bloomed. Benjen chasing her through uncut barley. Benjen dangling from a training dummy's wooden arm while Brandon roared his outrageous laughter. "I will miss him," she added. They reached the stairs. The snow picked at their cloaks like greedy children. But when has the wall ever lacked for Starks? Their boots rang on stone. "He goes north, I remain. That balance must do," Ned murmured. The lantern at the stair base painted trumpeting silhouettes on the wall. "And you," his voice softened, "you saved me from a southern marriage I scarcely desired. I fear I have only asked more of you in return. You rule Winterfell in Catelyn's stead while I attend my lords and liege men. I have given you duty as thanks for survival." Lyanna squeezed his arm. "Winterfell is no duty, Eddard. It is home. And you could not marry me to the Riverlands had you tried." Her laugh slanted through the drafty stairwell, light enough to surprise them both. "I would have climbed out a window the wedding night." The courtyard's bustle spilled into the covered gallery. Dogs barking, the distant clang of steel where Sir Roderick drilled the green boys by lamplight. Lyanna breathed in the mingled scents, iron pine smoke, warm bread from the kitchens. All her life she had galloped its paths, but now each familiar perfume felt sharpened, as if her absence in Dorne had scoured her senses clean. She recalled the evening Ned first placed the jagged silver keys of Winterfell in her palm. "Mother's keys," he named them. "Now yours." She had not cried. She had not broken since the tower. Yet the keys shivered in her half-healed fingers, as though they recognized her heart's raw places. They paused where the corridor bent toward the great hall. Ned's men-at-arms bowed, resplendent in gray cloaks heavy with frost. "My lady," they greeted, and Lyanna inclined her head, surprised each time the honorific fell from hardened soldiers' tongues. Her brother's face was unreadable as river ice, but she sensed approval beneath it. Ned desired Winterfell's people to see her thus, standing, whole, unhidden by sickbed curtains or rumor. Alive. Inside, the hall was all amber glow. The hearths roared, 20 feet long, shadows of antler racks dancing on the stone ribs of the ceiling. High on the dais sat her wolfskin chair. Hers now, though she still touched the carved arm as though it might vanish. Bran the Builder had chiseled direwolves there, jaws open in eternal snarl. She took her seat while Ned joined the bench reserved for the Lord's household, near enough to confer yet distant enough to watch. Stewards carried trencher bread and hot mutton stew, and the smell made her stomach lurch pleasantly. The healers warned her appetite would return in fits. She forced herself to dip bread in the thick brown broth anyway, because weakness fed on hesitation. Around her, small folk filtered in for warmth and evening rations. An old courtesy of Winterfell, older than kings in the north. Lyanna welcomed each with a nod. She remembered their mothers and fathers, could name their dogs. The axe steadied her more than the food. Ahar Snowdust shook his cloak and stepped forward, doffing a battered cap. "Begging pardon, lady," he began. His cheeks were red from wind. "The stores in the granaries, old Nan says the barley sacks near the west wall. Sweat poisoned rot." Lyanna raised a hand. Ned, at her flank, stilled the man with a calm look. She said, "I will ride at dawn to see. If it spreads, we'll salt the floorboards and move the grain to the ale cellars. The hounds can eat the worst, and the small folk may take what's cleanest this very night. Tell Harlan to call the wagons." Ahar blinked. He had expected to explain, to plead, then bob. "Same, lady." Gratitude warmed his weather-lined face. He retreated, and the next petitioner advanced. Through it all Ned watched. Silent guardian. He spoke only twice, once to advise on a boundary dispute with White Harbor, once to remind her to drink. As the torches guttered low and the last small folk bowed themselves out, silence fell save the crackle of fire. Lyanna leaned back, the wolf heads curving under her hands, and for a heartbeat she forgot the desert, forgot screaming, forgot the scent of blood and crushed blue flowers. Winterfell embraced her in raw spruce smoke and the deep, remembered percussion of the godswood heart tree beyond the walls. When the hall had emptied, Ned approached. "You rule better than Brandon," he said deadpan. "Brandon would have thrown the grain to the dogs and made a jest of it," Lyanna answered, smiling, not wistfully, but alive. She had learned the trick of speaking of the dead without letting grief chew through sentences. The trick did not always hold, yet tonight it did. They walked the length of the hall, their footfalls echoing. At the doors, Ned paused. "I will call our bannermen for council within the month. Lord Wyman writes of southern tremors. John Arryn at the Eyrie fortifies his passes, and Robert Baratheon thrashes in Storm's End like a caged bull. He writes you letters still. He writes you letters still." Lyanna stiffened. "I have answered none." "I know." Ned's voice was careful, but his ravens grow more fervent. "Let Robert rage," she almost said, but bit the words. She owed Robert Baratheon something. What? She was not sure. Promise? Friendship? Acknowledgement of the wild grief he bore when he believed her dead. The gods alone sorted such debts. "We will host our lords before New Year," she said. "The first winter snows will close the King's Road soon enough." Ned inclined his head. "I will send the ravens." Then he folded his arms, hesitant. "Will you come to the Godswood with me?" "I can sleep only if I kneel there first." She hesitated. The Godswood whispered memories she was not yet ready to chase. "Later," she managed. "I wish to walk the ramparts again. The snow calms me." Ned accepted without protest and strode away, cloak trailing. Lyanna watched the hall doors close behind him. Outside, the storm had thickened. Moonlight glazed each flake, turning the courtyard to pale glass. She drew her cloak tight and stepped into the hush. Footprints from the supper crowd stretched to the stables in shallow indents, already softening beneath fresh snow. Wind rattled the cold iron portcullis. The sound reminded her of a harp smashed against stone. She halted, breathing slow, banishing the image. Rhaegar's hands had coaxed music from silver strings. Fool girl? She reproved herself. Fool dream-drunk girl. Carried off by a song. That song had burned kingdoms. Lyanna. Benjen's voice came from the shadows. He emerged beside the bronze direwolf statue, hood thrown back to catch flakes in his dark hair. He moved with a restless energy she remembered from his childhood. Still the eager pup chasing ravens. You court frostbite wandering nightly. I court peace, she answered. Benjen's grin flashed white. He produced a wineskin and offered it. Mulled, courtesy of Gage. I smuggled a pinch of cinnamon from White Harbor trade. She drank, heat pricked down her throat. Cinnamon. Rarer than gold up here. A scent of distant ports. I have leave to ride north, Benjen went on, voice softer. Ned will keep Summerhall for love of you, but every morning he studies those maps of the wall as though measuring the journey. He would ride too, had duty not chained him, Lyanna said. She swallowed more wine. Felt the cinnamon bloom in her limbs. And what binds you? The wall binds every Stark, he replied simply. But you keep Winterfell beating. That is what father believed a lady must do. So, he tapped a gloved finger to her forehead. Guard your hearth. When the snows grow taller than towers, the south will beg your mercy. Nanon? The winds lifted her hair, dark strands snapping like banner silk. Benjen stared as though reconfirming she was real. She recalled the day she returned. Benjen had wept without shame, arms locked around her waist, while Ned watched rigid and shaking. Afterward, he rarely gazed at her directly, as though to see her too clearly might shatter the spell. She pressed his arm. Ride safe, little brother. Ride often. And tell the wall to be gentle with you. He barked a laugh. The wall is as gentle as a crone's claws. Then he sobered. Robert will come north, Lyanna. He will not let you slip from his reach again. I know. She passed the wineskin back. I dared Rhaegar's Prince of Dragonstone to steal me, and he died for it. I will not be stolen twice. Benjen studied her, snowflakes melting on his lashes. You are stronger than before, he said. But even a show wolf may heal over scars. He tapped his chest. Here, a scar stiffens the skin so it will not tear again, she murmured. Let Robert come. Let the realm come. Winterfell endures. The words felt like steel unsheathed. They parted on that promise. Benjen strode to his waiting men. Lyanna mounted the stair to the eastern rampart once more, boots crunching against fresh drift. The wind scoured her cheeks raw. Yet she lifted her chin to it, eyes narrowing on the dark swath of forest beyond the outer walls. Somewhere out there, the heart tree groaned beneath the weight of snow, its red leaves rustling secrets. Somewhere south, in halls flushed with autumn wine, the lion and the stag plotted, arguing over the spoils of a rebellion barely ended. And deep within her, a future stirred, unwritten, fragile as the half-formed petals of a winter rose. She thought of Jon, the infant Ned brought north swaddled in silence. Her brother said the child's mother died in the crossing. The boy's eyes were as gray as fog on the wolf's wood, solemn in their tiny cradle. Lyanna had watched Ned's guilt flicker each time he held the babe, but he would not speak. She did not press, but something inside her coiled, wary. Secrets had nearly slain them all. A gust tore across the rampart, ripping her cloak sideways. She pressed into the crenellation, laughing despite the sting. The tower bells pealed the hour. Far below, the god's wood pond gleamed black. She traced its inky shape, sensing the old god's eyes upon her even here, high in man-made stone. Remember us, they breathed. Remember what blood and promises bind. I remember, she whispered. The wind snatched the admission and flung it to the night. Footsteps approached again, quieter, measured. Maester Lewin's lamp, bobbed orange in the dark. "My lady," he called, voice trembling slightly from exertion. "The hour is late." "Always," she answered, turning. "But winter will be later." He offered her a blanket, soft woven wool that smelled of crushed lavender. She accepted it, draping it across her shoulders, feeling absurdly like a child scolded from tree climbing. Lewin's eyes, kind too clever, searched her face for signs of lingering fever, for shadows. She allowed his scrutiny. He had stitched her back together when she believed herself in pieces. "I fear you overtire," he murmured. "I fear I do not tire enough," she corrected, and they both smiled. The clouds parted, unveiling a sliver of moon, and the snow glittered so brightly that for a heartbeat, she saw the courtyard as it had been during her girlhood. Brandon twirling a weather vane like a jester's baton, Benjen vaulting hay bales, Ned leaning shyly against a pillar, penning a verse he would never show. Her own laughter echoed thinly, then dissolved. "Come, Lady Lyanna," Lewin urged. "Let Winterfell dream without its keeper a while." She yielded, descending the stair once more, slower now, blanket trailing. At the base, she paused, breathing in the mingled scents of wood smoke and crisp pine. She would sleep tonight, she decided. She would dream perhaps of snow untouched by blood. And tomorrow she would ride to the barley granaries at dawn, judge the rot with her own eyes, remind the small folk that when the storms called, Winterfell answered. In the warmth of her chambers, she stripped the snow-damp cloak and poured water into the basin, watching the steam curl in lazy ribbons. Her reflection wavered. Angular face, dark hair shorn shorter than once, eyes rimmed faint lavender from many sleepless dawns. Not the weeping maid Robert worshipped, nor the star-crowned princess of Rhaegar's vision. Something new. She dipped trembling fingers into the water and let the heat seep bone deep until feeling returned. Beyond the shutters, a wolf howled, single mournful note rising over the roofs. Others answered, distant. The pack roamed the wolf's wood tonight. Lyanna listened, heartbeat sensing to the howl's rhythm. The old rhythm of her house. Winter, blood, pack, snow, life. She dried her hands on linen, slipped beneath the furs of the great carved bed once her mother's, and closed her eyes. Dreams came lightly. The godswood glowing with candle stubs, Benjen waving from atop the wall's frozen rampart, Ned kneeling beside a cradle rocking to unseen tides. Then Robert, face flushed, voice thunderous, brandishing a sprig of blue winter roses that bled drops of color onto pristine snow. She touched the petals and felt them crumble to ash. Her eye snapped open. The fire had burned low, shadows twisting across the ceiling in patterns she did not recognize. She sat up, breath steady, and listened. The castle slept. Outside, the snow continued to fall, relentless and silent. Lyanna Stark lay back and counted her pulse until dawn pinked the shutters. When old Nan's knitting needles clacked somewhere down the hall and the first rooster crowed in the yard, she rose, donned her riding leathers, and met the new day unflinching. She would mend the barley rot, see Benjen north safely, quiet the rumors Robert's ravens carried. She would guard the child in Ned's lofted tower nursery, with the same steel patience she wielded at council. And if the South sent new wars northward, she would stand astride Winterfell's gates, cloak snapping like a banner, and remind the realm that wolves endured their wounds by showing teeth. For now, she strode toward the stables, breath a white plume in dawn's pale light, and the castle stirred awake around her. Bells, barking dogs, the thump of hooves. Her fingers closed around her mother's keys at her belt, and the sound of them clinking was the sure pulse of home. Ki, ka. Gray light seeped into Winterfell like water through cracked stone, dim and colorless, for dawn came slowly in the north and did not trust a winter sky. Lyanna Stark paced the mews before sunrise, boots crunching on a scatter of husks and broken straw, listening to the restless mutter of hawks, disturbed by her lantern. Odin, the white-feathered Tyrcel Brandon once stole from the Dreadfort's rookery, hissed and mantled when she passed. He had never quite forgiven any Stark for the theft, but Lyanna respected him because he outlived the thief. She paused to offer him slivers of venison still warm from the kitchens, Odin took them, then snapped at her knuckles for daring to linger. She laughed softly and let the lantern's glow play across his gilt eyes. One beast's resentment she could stomach. The realms might prove sour. Outside, grooms readied her mare. A hard-mouthed grey named Frostbite, who had carried her the last frantic miles from the Tower of Joy to the rendezvous with Ned's outriders. Frostbite greeted morning with rolling eyes and a stamp of iron on stone, but Lyanna trusted the mare's ill temper more than the docile obedience of palace palfreys. She swung into the saddle without waiting for the mounting block, ignoring the sharp protest in her half-mended ribs, and clucked the horse toward the south gate. Robar Glover and Hallis Mullen rode at her flanks, each with 2 men behind. Ned had wanted a dozen. She bargained him to 6. The barley rot would not stab her, she'd said. Hallis, broad as a meat-house door, carried a torch though the day was coming. Robar's cloak bore fresh snow along the shoulders, white powder settling in every slash of crimson silk. They made color enough to serve as banners. Past the looming broken tower, Winterfell's outer bailey opened to the causeway road and the smoking shapes of the granaries beyond the kennels. The barns were ancient, hewn pine blackened by centuries of pitch, rafters tight as a miser's purse. Lyanna dismounted before the largest, frost prickling her cheeks. 2 stable lads hauled the double doors wide. Heat rolled out in breathy wreaths, scented with grain and mouse droppings. Inside, rows of barley sacks stacked to the rafters sighed beneath their own weight. Harlan Talltree, a foreman whose beard reached his sternum, strode forward, wiping his palms on a length of sackcloth. "Lady, the rot starts middle tier west wall. Smells like sour ale with piss mixed in." "Show me," she said. They mounted a narrow catwalk. From there, in the smoky lamplight, she spotted the sickness. Dark streaks running down jute, glistening as if the grain bled tar. She slit one sack with her dagger. A puff of steam, warm and foul, billowed into her face and she coughed, eyes watering. The kernels within were slimy, riddled with black threads. When she rubbed them between finger and thumb, the mess left greasy smears like lamp oil. "Mold," she murmured. "Too near the hot baths. The spring that feeds them warms the stone even in frost. You've stacked too close." Harlan shifted uneasily. Space tightened after the last tithe, lady. "We tried." "This fault belongs to no one alive," Lyanna said. "Only to time and mischance. Have the sacks moved to the ale cellars by to-nightfall. Burn whatever's black. The rest we lay thin to dry in the old sheep pens. The ravens may steal their share, but better birds than poison in our bellies." Harlan bowed relief. "We'll start at once." Robar Glover leaned against the railing, hand on sword hilt. "We can spare men for hauling," he offered. "Spare only those who know a grain sack from a grain widow," Lyanna said, wiping her blade on a scrap of burlap. "I would not have lordlings drop a month's food, because pride forbids them to ask how to lift." Robar grinned. Benjen would say the same. That eased her heart, in quiet ways. Brandon's friends had been loud, Benjen's raucous. Robar wielded jokes like arrows, quick and true. They spent 3 hours overseeing the first removal. By late morning the granary yard crawled with activity. Carts creaked over rutted earth, dogs chased the mice scared out of hiding, and a chorus of men grunted as they shouldered sacks to safer shelter. Lyanna shed her riding gloves and carried bundles of lavender straw to layer between the dryer stores. She worked until sweat slicked her spine beneath wool and fur. When noon's pale sun lifted behind tattered clouds, she declared the danger contained and whistled for Frostbite. Riding home, she studied Winterfell's towers. From this angle, the great keep looked squat, almost humbled by snow. A plume of white rose from the godswood as some unseen gust shook powder from the tall sentinel trees. The stag banners atop the battlements, hung years ago when Rickard Stark marched south to answer Eris's summons, were long gone, burned with their shame. In their place flew direwolves so dark, the fabric swallowed daylight. Benjen waited in the yard, hoodless, his cheeks red as last year's apples. He took her mare's reins and clicked his tongue until Frostbite obeyed. "The rot." "Contained," she said, sliding down. "You ride tomorrow." He nodded once. setting jaw against unspoken doubts. You will watch Ned, yes? He pushes daylight aside like a maiden's veil, eager for midnight counsel. Too much weight on one quiet wolf. I will hammer him to bed if need be, she promised. And you, stop trying to taste every danger beyond the wall in one gulp. Leave some giants for your brothers. His grin crooked. If tales be true, giants grow bored of Starks. He glanced at the sky where gulls wheeled. Storm signs, he said. A squall tomorrow night. You'll be north of Last River by then. Watch the drifts, she said. Though both knew Benjen would watch everything. They walked arm in arm toward the kitchens, trading memories like stones turned beneath a stream. Smooth and bright when touched briefly, painful when held too long. Benjen teased her about the lantern incident with Odin, imitating bird screeches, and she answered by flicking snow at his ear. In the buttery they found Maester Luwin reginked with soot from head to heel. He'd been cataloging ledgers near the hearth, where the newborn pups of a hound litter nested in straw. The Maester lifted spectacles atop his head. Rot, he asked. Managed, Lyanna said. But we'll need a second threshing come spring. Noted, Luwin replied, tapping parchment. I have drafted a raven to Lord Menderley requesting seed barley. He hoards grain like a wealthy hen hoards chicks. Benjen accepted a heel of brown bread from the serving girl and chewed thoughtfully. Lord Menderley arrives himself soon, he said around crumbs. Passenger or merchant? Lyanna asked. Both, I suspect, Benjen answered. He means to remind us White Harbor stands ready if southern tongues wag too loud. As if conjured, a bell clanged at the outer gate. 3 crisp peals for visiting Lord Di. Lyanna blinked away exhaustion, tossed bread to the pups to Benjen's hoot of protest, and strode for the yard. Snow churned beneath wagon wheels as Lord Wyman Manderley's procession filed through the portcullis. Blue and white banners snapped, sea-green trident devices gleaming on brass-bossed shields. Wyman himself rode not a destrier, but a stout roan pony, bedecked in azure velvet. The pony's short legs churned valiantly through drifts. Above it the Lord of White Harbor bounced like a buoy, cheeks shining with cold and good humor. My lady, he boomed at first sight of Lyanna on the steps. Winter has blessed me with your safety. She descended, Robur at her side. Lord Wyman, Winterfell bids you warm. Gods deliver me if warmth is not precisely the thing the north hides from me. He laughed, dismounting. His boots sank wrist-deep in snow. But I have brought my own. He clapped. Servants hustled forward bearing casks sealed with white beeswax. Pickled crab and spiced rum from the sisters, for your tables. Lyanna inclined her head with grateful formality. Our kitchens rejoice already. Wyman lowered his voice. And sealed letters, from John Arryn and from Storm's End. Heavy birds these. His gaze softened. They weigh less in my bag than in your heart. Hallis collected the letters. Lyanna felt their weight indeed. John Arryn's crest. A sky-blue falcon. Robert's, the crowned stag reared in gold. She slipped them beneath her cloak. Servants guided Manderley's men to guest quarters, while Lyanna led Wyman through the covered walk that looped past the broken tower. He spoke without halt. News of trade tariffs, arguments between gull-keepers and dockmasters, a miracle catch of silver-bellied cod. She listened, steering him toward trivialities, delaying talk of lords and ravens and war. Inside the great hall, fires roared, reflecting copper off Wyman's rings. He settled onto a cushioned bench near the dais, and unasked, produced candied ginger from a pouch, offering a piece to Lyanna. She accepted. Heat bloomed on her tongue. Now, he said quietly, folding hands, the veil is uneasy. Miners in the mountains of the moon vanish. Lord Arryn suspects Sellsword's, perhaps Clegane's men run rogue. He wonders if King's Landing funds mischief. Lyanna thought of the last letter Ned received from the capital, thin, formal, no news at all. King Aerys is 10 months cold in his tomb, she said. Yet his crows still scratch. And Robert's hound howls, Wyman added. He begs leave to see you. Begging from Robert sounds like thunder, asking leave to reach the earth, she said. Wyman chuckled, then sobered. Nevertheless he comes. Stannis encamps outside Storm's End with levy drills twice each moon, steel on steel night and day. Some whisper the younger Baratheon guards his brother's temper more than the coast. Robert must grieve the war still, she said, though grief and desire often tangled, until no blade could separate them. She slipped her fingers around the stag-sealed letter. I will read and answer. Send answer quick, Wyman advised. Quick answers, slow rumors. She dismissed him to rest, but lingered alone at the hearth. Outside the windows dusk encroached, lilac bleeding toward indigo. She did not open Robert's missive yet. Instead, she broke Jon Arryn's seal. Lady Lyanna, I pray the snows find you restored. Rumors of mold in winter stores reach even these mountains. Should you require grain, the Eyrie will provide. Yet I write for more than trade. I fear the crown wears heavy upon the new king. Robert broods. He dreads autumn courts and refuses petitions long before they reach his table. I have argued for measured mercy. He listens, then drinks. I believe he would heed you where he resists all others. Should you see fit to journey south, the gates of the Eyrie stand open to you. Better yet, summon Robert to Winterfell. The North's air may freeze the heat that clouds his judgment. I beg you consider. In loyalty, Jon Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie, Hand of the King. Lyanna traced the signature, thinking of the austere Falcon Lord, who fought side by side with Ned and Robert. Fatherly yet distant. Summon Robert north. Nen's counsel would quake. Yet burying her head beneath furs would not erase storms on the horizon. She opened Robert's letter last. Lyanna, I will not scratch out pretty words. I have dreamt of your laugh every bloody night since the day they told me you lived. I ride north soon. No castle wall, no brother of yours, no snows higher than mountains will stand between us. When I reach Winterfell, I will claim the promise you made. We will speak of no ghosts, only of hearths and children, and the song of hammers forging crowns. Robert, so few words, yet each beat like war drums. Robert wrote like he fought. Straight, leaving head spinning in his wake. She closed her eyes, breathed once, twice, folded the parchment. She burned none of the letters. Instead, she carried them to her solar, locked them in a carved cedar chest, and summoned Maester Luwin. They spoke until evening bells. Luwin, ever measured, suggested inviting Robert in spring, after winter's teeth dulled. He will not wait, Lyanna said. He is already in the saddle. Then we prepare, Luwin answered. Lists unfurled, guest rooms, stores, guard rotations. She listened, added, amended. The day slid away like thawed ice, unseen until puddles formed. In the stable yard, lanterns flickered warm against the oncoming night. Benjen drilled his ranging party in knots and turns for frozen rivers. Lyanna watched a while, unseen in the archway, pride knotting in her throat. She wanted to call out, but if she broke his rhythm, he would never forgive her. So she retreated, soft as snow. Supper came lively. Manderly regaled the table with a bawdy sailing song, until Septa Mordane coughed pointedly. Ned appeared late, hair windblown, bass drawn. He greeted guests, took his place by Lyanna, said little, but his knee bounced under the board. After the meal, she pulled him aside beneath the stone sconce outside the kitchens. Robert rides, she said. Ned's mouth became a pale line. We will receive him. His breath fogged between them. He will expect everything. Let him expect, she said. Expectation is malleable. I am not the girl he loved before the rebellion. He will learn. He may break. Ned's eyes were those of the boy who watched Ares burn their father. So might we, she replied. But not tonight. Sleep. Benjen leaves with dawn. He deserves our smiles, not grim prophecy. They dissipating more. In court. Ned nodded, though doubt lingered like a bruise. He squeezed her forearm. The realm balances on hearts grown raw, sister. Take care it does not slip. She watched him stride away, shoulder brushing the wall as though some weight pressed sideways. Beyond corridor windows, the sky flashed dull green. Aurora smudges on the horizon, dancing faint behind veils of snow. Old Nan called those the spirits of slain kings. Lyanna wondered which king might be dancing tonight. Eris, perhaps, flames still licking bone. She passed the nursery on her way to chambers. A nurse hummed inside. The tune drifted into the hall, soft as spun wool. Lyanna opened the door quiet. Candlelight flickered over carved toys on shelves, over woven tapestries of the first men. In a cradle of dark wood lay Ned's son, Jon Snow. The infant slept. One tiny fist curled beside his ear. His breath, a whisper of clouds. A tuft of black hair spiked from his head like the point of a quill. Lyanna stepped closer, drawn numbingly by something unnamed. She touched the cradle's rim. The baby stirred, opened gray eyes darker than the stark hue, ancient eyes for one so new. They stared at each other. "Little wolf," she whispered, "what secrets were sung to you in the womb?" The child's gaze seemed to pierce veils she herself skirted. Jon gurgled gently, as if answering. She reached, and his fingers, no thicker than quills, closed around hers with startling strength. The nurse, a plump woman named Milla, looked up from her spinning. "He wakes often, my lady. Cold nights unsettle him." "Bring a brazier nearer," Lyanna said, "and sing louder. Wolves sleep to music better than to silence." "Thee." She disentangled her finger, though it was harder than drawing steel from a wound, and withdrew. That night Winterfell's courtyards burned with farewell torches for Benjen and his rangers. Steaming horses stamped, black brothers in coal-hued cloaks clasped arms with old friends, promising safe return. Lyanna stood on the gatehouse walk, cloak whipped, her hair a dark flutter against white stars. Benjen rode below, face upturned. "Guard the wall for me," she called. "Guard home for me," he answered, voice stolen by wind. Then he was through the gate, hooves drumming away into the snowy dark, until lanterns swallowed the riders like sparks in ash. The night emptied his laughter from the air, leaving an ache that cooled slowly. Lyanna descended the steps, feeling each rung in her bones. She slept poorly. Dreams pressed around her like armored specters. Bands of gold roses crushed beneath armored heels, Ned's voice begging oath under bleeding starlight, a prince's song cut mid-verse by silent swords. She woke before dawn, shivering though furs lay high. Unable to close her eyes again, she dressed, bound her hair tight, and went to the training yard. Torches still flickered from farewell fires, though most had guttered. Snow fell heavy but straight, no wind to twist it. Sir Roderick Castle drilled alone, blade humming in the hush. Seeing her, he checked his stroke and bowed from the waist. "I would spar," she said. His brows knitted. "Your ribs are healed more than my mind," she answered. "Steel men's both." He reluctantly fetched a pair of tourney swords weighted with lead. They circled, feet scuffing snow, steam ghosting from mouths. Roderick was broad and sure. Lyanna fought with speed, jabbing, retreating, weaving until lungs burned. Roderick pressed harder, sweat dappling his brow despite the cold. When she slipped on iced flagstone he halted, but she lunged from the ground, blade tip grazing his thigh. Satisfaction sparked bright. They broke apart, breathing thunder, and he laughed. A rich, hearty bellow that startled crows from the ramparts. "Again," she said, voice raw joy, and they fought until sunrise gilded the towers, rose gold. By then her arms quaked, and Sir Roderick's beard glittered with ice crystals. He bowed again, eyes gleaming proud. "If Lord Rickard could see his daughter," he said, "he might order me to the sept for penance," she quipped, though part of her dearly wished her father could indeed witness her alive, sword in hand. She went straight to the baths after, shrugging off cloth stiff with frost, sinking into steaming water until muscles loosened. Through high glass slits, daylight brightened weak and brave. In the afternoon, ravens departed bearing her replies. To Jon Arryn, gratitude and assurance that Winterfell's hearth awaited should the hand journey north. To Robert, a single line. Winterfell welcomes King Robert Baratheon, and prays the snows prove no hindrance to a safe ride. She sealed it with stark white wax. No words of affection. No mention of promise. Let Robert parse meaning as he would. 3 days slid by, each thick with chores. Lyanna walked granary lofts that smelled now of pine after fresh sawdust floors were laid. She drafted orders for extra barley shipments along harbor roads, inspected the forges where Micken hammered reapers' blades. She ate with Manderley, Ned, and the Castellan every meal, discussing tariffs, seatings, hunting routes for royal guests. Rumors of Robert's progress came like snow squalls. First he crossed the neck, then lingered at Moat Cailin to inspect its mossy towers, then drank the inn at Barrowton dry. Lyanna neither fretted nor fretted not. She performed duties until body and mind both dropped into dreamless slumber each night. On the 4th dawn since Benjen's Liveth taking, Maester Luwin found her in the library cataloguing a warped Valyrian scroll. He held a fresh parchment. "A raven from Castle Serwyn," he said. "Your brother reached the gift last night." "All well." Relief unfurled in her chest, though she merely nodded. "Good. Also," Luwin hesitated. "A bird from Lord Howland Reed." Lyanna set the scroll aside. Howland Reed, Cranagman Lord, Ned's friend, sworn to carry certain memories to grave. Read. Luwin adjusted spectacles. "He writes, 'The mists of the neck whisper that Greywater should drift north again if the rivers flood red.' We stand ready." She exhaled slowly. "Howland speaks in riddles because clarity frightens him. Or because couriers load wagging tongues," Luwin said dryly. "Tell him the rivers freeze solid still," she replied. "No flooding here." "Very good." He turned, halted. "My lady, the boy, Jon Snow, his cough worsens." She stilled. "He coughed last month also." "This winter strikes sharper," Luwin warned. "A fire in his chambers may soothe, but warmth fosters infection too. I would move his cradle to the solar where daylight reaches." "Then de sermon." "Do it," she said. "I will sit with him tonight. A stark babe will not gasp helpless while I breathe." Evening found her humming an old wolf song by the boy's cradle, rocking him while the fire popped. Jon's tiny chest hitched with each breath, but color perked in his cheeks after warm milk and a drop of Maester's draft. She dabbed his lips when he dribbled. Ned entered silently, boots scuffing floorboards. He watched, eyes soft, shoulders sagging as though he'd trudged leagues. Lyanna spoke first. "You need sleep worse than he." "I cannot," he whispered. "Images." He touched the babe's foot. "He reminds me of you as a child. Fierce even asleep." She glanced at her brother's hand. Scarred knuckles, veins like frost lines. "Truth weighs heavier than swords, Ned. When it cracks under strain, it cuts." He flinched, then straightened. "One day." "Not now," she said. "Your son breathes." She stressed the word. "And that must be enough." He swallowed. Candlelight trembled on his face. "Enough," he echoed, yet looked unconvinced. He kissed Jon's brow, murmuring an old northern prayer, then left, cape trailing sorrow. Lyanna stayed until the candle stubs melted into waxy puddles and Jon's breath steadied. She dozed in a chair, waking only when wolves howled beyond the walls. The pack closer tonight, voices threading the wind in high, mournful curls. Morning rose, brittle blue. A horn blast on the western rampart wrenched her from breakfast. Riders approaching. She glanced at Ned across the table. His expression shuddered. Together, they donned cloaks and strode to the outer gate. Snow churned beneath iron-shod hooves as the royal party approached. A comet of color across the drifts, black and gold banners streaming, gaily painted shields glittering beneath rime, musicians blowing horns that wheezed in cold. At their fore, mounted on a massive black stallion, rode Robert Baratheon. He no longer wore the lightness of a young stag. War and grief had forged breadth into his frame, layering muscle with heavy indulgence, yet his eyes retained the bright stormy blue that once dazzled her on tourney grounds. He saw her upon the battlements and let out a triumphant bellow that sent birds shrieking from nearby pines. "Lyanna," he roared, voice cracking Winter's spine. He swung from his saddle before the horse stopped, boots sinking deep. A knight hurried to steady the reins. Robert barreled forward, scattering snow, cloak billowing. Lancers scrambled aside lest he trampled them. Lyanna descended slowly, measured. Her heart thudded, but pace remained deliberate. She reached the yard as Robert halted 2 paces away. Steam radiated from him in gusts. His beard was beaded with frost. He reached, seized her fingers, gloved, and pressed them within his huge mitts. "Gods," he muttered. "I feared I dreamed you all these miles." His grip eclipsed pain and welcome together. "I live," she said softly, "and Winterfell stands." He laughed, throaty, eyes bright. "I will drink a barrel for each word you speak." He glanced right, found Ned. Color flushed his cheeks deeper. He released Lyanna and clasped Ned's forearm. "Brother," he said, voice thick with gratitude, grief, love muddled. Ned returned the grip, wordless. Robert turned again to Lyanna. "I bring half a kingdom of pomp," he said, almost sheepish. "Forgive spectacle." "Spectacle warms the gates," she replied. "We laid hay in the paddocks for your horses, and spiced wine for your men, those still sober, at least." He guffawed. "We'll cure the sober quickly." His gaze swept castle walls. "Your home suits you." His tone grew softer, serious. "May I?" He gestured vaguely, as though to embrace. Snow drifted between them. Lyanna inclined her head. He stepped forward, arms enveloping her in bare strength. She stiffened, then forced shoulders to soften. His cloak smelled of horse sweat and juniper. The embrace lasted heartbeats, long enough to recall Rhaegar's gentle hold, Ned's fierce protective squeezes, Brandon's rib-crushing merriment, and ended abruptly when she eased away. Robert swallowed a smile half hopeful. "Inside," she said, "your men need warmth." Within the great hall, roaring fires greeted them. Robert's retinue filed in. Sir Barristan Selmy shining in polished plate. Renly Baratheon, younger than memory, face open and curious. Stannis, lean and grim, scanning corners as if expecting betrayal from shadows. Maester Pycelle trundled behind, muttering about lung ailments. Lyanna's maester traded curt nods with him. Seating had been rehearsed. Robert center of dais, Ned on his right, Lyanna on his left, though slightly withdrawn per northern custom. Yet Robert stopped before the dais and stared at the high carved chair with direwolf heads. "That yours?" he asked her. She nodded. He pulled it out, gestured. "Then sit." Mountain, river, king all bow to Winterfell's lady this night. Murmurs rippled. Lyanna hesitated. Ned raised a brow. Warning or acceptance she could not tell. She sat, spine straight, cloak sweeping. Robert claimed the seat beside her, not the central throne prepared. "Food," he boomed, clapping. Servants bustled. Conversation resumed, cautious. Throughout the meal, Robert's attention pivoted between her and the platters. He spoke of hunting boar on the Barrow Downs, of Stannis' new war galleys, of tournament offers from Old Town. She answered politely, sparingly. When Manderly praised her handling of the barley rot, Robert grinned. "Lady and steward and warrior," he said. "7 save any man who challenges the wolf maid." Later, cups lifted, talk turned to alliances. Lord Wyman ventured mention of unrest in the Crownlands. Small folk discontent over new taxes. Robert waved a hand. "Coins sprout from fertile ground when spring comes." Lyanna sipped wine. "Spring delays longest when seeds are withheld." Robert eyed her, amused. "Ever the rebel's daughter." "Rebellion forged your crown," she answered. A hush fell. Robert's grin faltered. Then he laughed, too loudly. Conversation stuttered back. Midway through the 3rd course, Jon Snow awoke upstairs wailing. Lyanna's ears pricked. The hall continued, oblivious. She rose, bowed cursory, and moved from the dais. Robert's brows knitted. He half rose, but Ned laid a hand on his arm. Lyanna escaped into echoing passages, her pace quickening with the crying. She found Mila rocking the baby, cheeks flushed frustration. "He misses your smell, milady," the nurse said, breathless. Lyanna took the swaddled child, crooning low. Jon hiccuped, eyes damp, but quieted against her chest. She paced before the hearth whispering, a northern lullaby about silent snow falling on stone kings, her voice a rough thread of sound. The child's breathing steadied. Lyanna felt his heartbeat thrum tiny and fierce. Something inside her settled likewise, as though the frantic pulse of the feast beyond these walls had faded behind his small, undeniable existence. Oat scuffed at the threshold. Robert stood, uncertain, holding a goblet but otherwise at loss. "Heard a babe crying," he explained. "Thought. Well." He approached, slow. "Yours?" "My nephew," she answered. Not untrue, though the syllables tasted like iron. Robert leaned to inspect the infant's face. Dark hair, good. A Stark. He smiled, and for a moment looked young again. "He smiles like you." "He cannot yet smile," she said softly. "Then he will," Robert replied. He swirled wine, cleared throat. "Will you walk tomorrow? Show me the godswood you boasted of at Harrenhal." "I never boasted," she said, rocking gently. "But yes, if weather allows." "Weather be damned," he chuckled. Then his laugh faded. "Lyanna, when I saw your body absent from that tower, He broke off, shook head, drained goblet. "No matter. You live. I would carve roads through ice to stand beside you." She met his gaze. "Steady. Stand beside, yes. Chain? No." He looked wounded, confused, then slowly understanding twisted his mouth. "We shall talk," he said, voice measured. "Tomorrow, after Godswood." He squeezed her shoulder awkwardly and left. The door shut softly. Jon slept, tiny fists unclenched. Lyanna exhaled. Outside, wind rattled shutters. The next day dawned gray-white. Snow had deepened in night. Paths needed shoveling. Robert waited in the yard, fur cloak and antler helm gleaming. Ned flanked him visibly uncomfortable. Lyanna arrived with guards, though Robert waved them back. They walked the crunching path to the godswood, breath pluming. The weirwood's red leaves drooped beneath frost, its face streaked with fresh icicles like tears. Robert muttered a southern prayer under his breath. The seven, foreign to these woods, and Lyanna almost smiled. They spoke little until the pond, iced rim with mist curling above dark water. Robert halted, turned to her. "I would marry you still." "There was promise once," she answered. "I broke it. Not by choice. Yet broken, all the same." He stepped forward, heavy boots creaking snow. "We can mend." Lyanna looked past him to the heart tree. Memories surfaced like corpses in thaw. Rhaegar's fingertips plucking harp strings, whispering of a song of ice and fire. Brandon throttling, her own screams, Ned's pale face. She swallowed. "I crossed deserts, nearly died, to escape men who decided my heart's path for me," she said. "I will not yield to another path chosen by fear of loss." "Robert, I do not love you." "They." The words crystallized between them, fragile and brutal. Robert's breath halted, eyes widening. Color drained from his cheeks, replaced by flush. Muscles bunched beneath cloak. "You loved me once," he said, a plea. "I loved a dream," she answered. "A green summer dream." Summer died. Silence. A magpie cried overhead. Robert's jaw worked. Finally, he expelled a tremorous sigh. "Then I will not anchor you," he said thickly. "But I will remain friend if you allow." She touched his gloved hand. "I would have that." He looked down at their hands, swallowed again, then barked a laugh cut short. "Stannis will rage," he said, masking pain with humor. "He forged an alliance in his books already. Then he must rewrite," Lyanna said gently. They walked back slower. Robert asked about Benjen's post, about the wall. She described Ranger's routines. He listened, though sorrow shadowed his eyes. When they parted at the keep steps, he pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "5 days I stay," he said. "Then back south. The throne squeaks worse than an old cart when my weight lifts." "Men?" Those 5 days unfolded in measured rhythms. A hunt where Robert speared a snow bear that charged one of his squires. Feast songs, where he drank, but did not doom the hall to riot. Long councils with Ned, Stannis, Maester Luwin, speaking low of taxes and Riverland's banditry. Lyanna attended some, but not all. She spent hours with Jon, with the granaries, with Sir Roderick's practice yard. She sparred twice with Renly, quick, laughing bouts that left the younger Baratheon both bruised and smitten. She visited Manderley's wagons, sampling sisters' crabs soaked in vinegar. On the last night, Robert requested a private supper in the Solar. She agreed. He arrived in plain wool tunic, belt askew, hair still damp from bathwater. He placed a small velvet bag on the table. "Open," he grunted. Inside lay a single winter rose wrought of lapis gemstones, petals edged in silver. It caught candlelight, flickering blue fire. "Ah, token," he said quietly. "Not a chain. Keep or cast away as you will." She held the rose, felt its chill metal weight. It reminded her of Dorne, of a real blue rose drooping from a dying prince's fist. She closed the bag. "I will keep it for memory," she said. "The best I can ask," he murmured. They ate boar stew, shared stories of Bran's pranks, of Robert's first drunken tourney, of Benjen's endless wagers. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they did not. When the candles guttered low, Robert stood. "Farewell, Wolf," he said, voice low. "Ride safe," she answered. He hesitated, then bent and kissed her cheek, beard scratching. Tears glinted in his lashes but did not fall. At dawn the royal retinue clattered from Winterfell's gate. Robert turned in the saddle, raised a mailed fist. Lyanna, Ned, and the household watched from the wall walk. Snow-muffled hooves soon. Banners vanished into white haze. Lyanna exhaled sharp as branded snow. Ned glanced sideways. "You are well? Choices cut less than chains," she said. He nodded. "There will be whispers. There always are." She gripped the stone parapet, felt its solidity. "We weather them." They descended to breakfast. Lord Wyman already drafted letters praising Winterfell's diplomacy. Maester Luwin prepared stable hands to haul Robert's leftover barrels as gifts to small folk. Children sledded down the hill behind the armory, shrieking delight. The world resumed. Weeks passed. Snow deepened, roads clogged. Ravens brought word Benjen reached Castle Black. He wrote of Aurora dancing like fire spirits. Lyanna smiled at his crude drawings of giants' footprints. One bleak midwinter morn, while counting arrowheads in the armory, Lyanna received another raven. This one from Howland Reed again. Mist thickens. Shadows move beneath ice. Remember the promise to the prince that was promised. She stared at the cryptic line until letters blurred. Promise, Prince. Words from Rhaegar's dying lips. Words she shoved deep like broken shards. She folded the parchment, tucked it in her sleeve. Outside, snowflakes waltzed, ignorant of prophecy. That evening, she visited the crypts. Torch in hand, she descended stone steps into the chill vault, where kings of winter sat forever with iron swords across laps. She passed Brandon and Rickard's alcoves, pausing to brush dust from their marble direwolves. At the far end, an empty niche awaited her, yet uncarved. She stopped before it, torch sputtering. "I will not rest here soon," she whispered to the still air. "I have tasks." She moved backward until stone touched her shoulders. The wall at her back, the empty future before. She lifted the torch higher. Shadows danced across names chiseled in ancient script. Torhen, Artos the Implacable, Alara, the She-Wolf. Their silent witness braced her. Rising again to daylight, she felt lighter, as though leaving burdens with the dead. In the yard, Jon Snow toddled between Nurse Milla and a guardsman, fists full of snow clumps. He saw Lyanna, squealed delight, and fell on his bottom. She rushed forward, scooped him, feathers of frost on his hair. He grabbed her braid with vigorous aim. "You would ride wolves if allowed," she told him, ticking his belly until he giggled. From the rampart Ned watched, expression unreadable. Lyanna met his gaze, nodded. He inclined his head slightly. Gratitude, guilt, love. She kissed Jon's forehead. Winter crept deeper. The world beyond Winterfell spun snow-blind tales. In Riverlands, Lord Hoster fell ill. In Old Town, the Citadel argued over a red star glimpsed at dawn. On Dragonstone, Queen Rhaella's young son Viserys fled to Bravos with loyalists. Yet those storms raged distant. Inside Winterfell's high walls, grain dried, forges burned, children learned letters by Manderley's Harper. Lyanna sat long nights drafting codes of stewardship, teaching Hallis to read harvest ledgers, letting Sir Roderick adjust her sword grip until muscles remembered swiftness without pain. She visited Jon daily, teaching him to clap to wolf howls. One morning near mid-February, as snows glimmered with sunrise, Lyanna and Ned stood atop the outer gatehouse surveying fields turned white desert. Smoke spiraled from cottages where small folk baked barley cakes, courtesy of her decree. She tasted cold on her tongue like new steel. Her cloak snapped. "Father would have been proud," Ned said abruptly. She kept eyes forward. "You say that often." "Because it is true, and because I forget to say it about living kin until it is too late." His breath fogged. "You hold Winterfell, Lyanna. You hold me." She rested gloved hand on his wrist. "We hold each other." They stood in silence, listening to the creak of ice settling on ramparts. Somewhere a raven croaked. Far south, wheels of power turned. Crowns weighed men's brows. Lords sharpened ambitions like blades. But here, atop ancient stone, two wolves inhaled crisp air and believed, if only for a heartbeat, that winter itself could be tamed. Deep in Lyanna's cloak pocket lay the lapis rose. She pressed it briefly, felt its cold petals bite skin. She did not know the shape of battles yet to come, whether songs of ice and fire would bloom or freeze. But she knew this: she was no dream chained to a pedestal. She was Lady of Winterfell, blood and breath, heart still stubbornly beating. And as snowflakes drifted past her lashes, disappearing on warm skin, she whispered a promise to the old gods, to her brothers living and dead, to a babe with ancient eyes, to the prince of prophecies, to herself. "When storms rise, the Shevwolf will bare her teeth, and the pack will howl." Ya, ka. Time passed in small and certain increments. The daily toll of bells, the measured scrape of shovels on ice, the low, constant rumble of Winterfell's stone lungs. Lyanna felt the castle settle into a rhythm that echoed her own pulse. Steady, unapologetic, unafraid. Dawn bled pale above the battlements. Mid-morn rang with hammer blows from the forges. Dusk exhaled hearth smoke through every vent, until the sky itself seemed to taste of pine tar and iron. Beneath that familiar cadence, deeper currents moved. Letters arriving under seal of wax, scouts reporting odd tracks beyond the last river, soft rumors of dragon sons and sellsword hosts, whispers in Maester Luwin's rookery about a red comet scholars feared might slice the sky come spring. But for Lyanna Stark, the next weeks belonged to the north and to the tasks of living. She rose each day well before full light, slipping from her chamber without waking the sleepy kitchen maid who stoked her hearth. At first frost, she would pace the outer walk while the sentries nodded greetings. Afterward, she joined Sir Roderick on the yard's packed snow circle for sword drills. Practice she disguised as warming her blood, though Ned called it testing death's patience. The sessions sharpened her reflexes and, more quietly, dulled the sharper edges etched inside her since dawn. With every parry, she felt the memory of a prince's harp grow softer, the weight of Robert's unopened future grow lighter. When the practice concluded, she tended to daily counsel, tallies of saltfish, logs for the bathhouses, allocations of charcoal to distant holdfasts. She hung iron keys from her belt and learned the feel of each. Granary, armory, kennel, scriptorium. They chimed like chimes struck by a winter wind when she walked the corridors, a chorus of small responsibilities marking her steps. Snow deepened until the world flattened white. The main yard became a valley of wind-shoved drifts. Lanterns burned day-long, blue flames beneath the indigo sky. One morning, a fresh storm buried the stable's south side, clean to the roofline, forcing Lyanna and 3 ostlers to dig out with shovels while Frostbite screamed in her stall. Frostbite kicked a wallboard into splinters, Lyanna ignored the throbbing bruise where a hoof grazed her arm, and freed the mare by rope and calm whispers, until the beast's rolling eyes stilled. She left the stall that day smelling of horse sweat and cedar, her braid coarse with ice, her mood strangely soothed. Duty could be savage yet honest. Winterfell's beasts never lied. The royal party lingered longer than Robert's promised 5 days, 10, then 12, unable to break the deepening banks along the King's Road. Robert drank more heavily, but grief and disappointment had tempered him. He cracked fewer bawdy jokes and spent long evenings in Ned's solar with maps, Stannis scowling across the table. Lyanna attended some of these councils, seldom speaking unless Ned signaled. She sensed Stannis' steady gaze on her more than once, measuring, weighing, but the Baratheon's stern features yielded no judgment she could read. Renly, by contrast, drifted through Winterfell like a playful breeze, sparring with squires, offering compliments on the stew, pressing flowers between scraps of parchment for the kitchen girls. He left half the household fluttering. Lyanna endured his banter with mild amusement. On the 13th sunrise, word came that the main causeway south had finally been cleared by trestle crews and firepots. Robert announced departure for first light. The castle buzzed with preparations. Keg barrels loaded, garrons reshod, banners unfurled. Robert summoned Lyanna the evening before, requesting her presence in the small sept Ned's grandfather, built-in concession to southern guests. She went, curious and cautious. Candles lined the modest stone chamber, their flames bending beneath unseen drafts. Stained glass cast dull greens across cold tiles, saints of the seven stoic in their niches. Robert stood before the warrior's pane, cloaked but bareheaded, hair rumpled as if he'd run his fingers through it 1,000 times. When he turned, sorrow darkened his eyes. "I wanted to say farewell without a crowd," he said. "Then speak," she replied gently. He hesitated, then produced a silver flask engraved with antlers. "I thought I would toast your happiness," he said. "Yet the words taste sour. Happiness too small for you, you deserve more. Happiness is a hearth that doesn't falter," she said. "It is the crops that live through frost. Do not measure me by a queen's chair, Robert." He drew breath, exhaled jagged. "I never truly desired the damned crown, only you. Yet time rewrites every wish. I will ride south and be a king. You will stay north and be what you are." He managed to smile. "And the realm will call itself lucky we both still draw breath." He uncorked the flask, poured 2 measures into plain cups waiting on the step before the father's alcove. Half the liquid sloshed, he cursed softly. "To Winterfell," he said, raising his cup. "To Storm's End," she replied. They drank. The liquor burned spiced cinnamon along her tongue. Wyvern fire, rare and dear. The heat settled in her chest, coiled around some hidden trembling she refused to name. Robert set his empty cup aside, reached into his cloak, and produced a square of folded leather. He pressed it into her palm. It was warm from his body. She unfolded it slowly. Within lay a lock of black hair tied by a thin strip of blue ribbon. "From my mother," Robert said quietly. "She cut it the day I first drew a tourney sword. Said a warrior should carry his family with him into battle. I never dared wear it for fear I'd lose it. Keep it for me, until next we meet." Lyanna turned the small braid under the candlelight. The hair glinted dark chestnut, rather than Robert's own black, subtle hint of stone-dorn sun in the strands. It felt surprisingly soft. She closed the leather. "I will keep it safe," she said. "No more promises, only fact." He bowed, truly bowed, formal and slow, then strode from the sept before she could speak again. His boots sent echoes, ricocheting off holy stone. She watched the door until the candle's sway stilled. Then, she tucked the keepsake into an inner pocket and left before the silence grew too reverent for her restless blood. Robert's departure at dawn painted the yard in gold reflections off polished breastplates. As horns blew, Lyanna stood on the gatehouse among household guard and small folk, her white direwolf cloak rippling. She raised a gloved fist in farewell. Robert looked back but once, casting his gaze along the wall, but lingering on her, expression raw with what might have been regret or release. Then the column moved, banners vanishing behind winter haze. The last thing she saw was Renly waving a green scarf at the kennel girls, drawing giggles despite frostbit faces. And then, they were gone. Winterfell exhaled. Without the southern retinue's bustle, corridors felt expansive and calm again. Yet echoes of council talk remained. Ned seemed more burdened now, though he hid it behind methodical tasks, rear-sharpening the sword ice, drafting letters to vassals, brooding over Jon's cradle. Lyanna watched him from afar and up close both. At dawn as he knelt by the heart tree, at dusk when he traced Jon's tiny palm with calloused thumb. Secrets ringed him like defensive walls. She wanted to smash them sometimes, but fear of wounding him deeper stayed her hand. As midwinter waned, the temperature dropped further, the sky often white from horizon to horizon. One afternoon, while walking the eastern parapet above the godswood, Lyanna spotted slender columns of smoke drifting from the far tree line where no cottage stood. She summoned a ranger named Kedge White-Eye and sent him to investigate. He returned 2 days later, leading 3 ragged families. Small folk from Deepwood Motte, driven north by raiders wearing patchwork cloaks in Lannister red and lion sigils, crudely daubed on shields. The lion banners unsettled her. What spurs Westerland sellswards this far north? She convened Ned and Sir Roderick. They pored over maps by torchlight, discussing guard rotations along the shivering sea road, and posting signal fires at Bearpath Ridge. Manderley offered White Harbor ships to patrol coastlines. Letters flashed up and down the north. Winterfell became a humming hive of carts laden with spare coal and raw wool for outlying keeps. Lyanna visited each arriving family personally, standing in the yard's cold slurry to greet them, placing hand on shoulders, promising food. Word spread. The She-Wolf Queen, despite her protests at the title, met refugees at the gate and burned her own candle supply to keep extra hearths lit. One evening, as she returned from distributing wolf fur blankets to the newcomers, she found Jon Arryn's raven perched on Maester Luwin's shoulder. The bird bore a scroll tube etched in bronze, sealed not with wax but with the falcon pin of the hand. She unstoppered it carefully. Lady Lyanna. Reports reach me from the Dornish marches. A sellsword host, bearing Targaryen banners, has gathered near the shadow city of Korth. Rumors claim the dragon's heir lives carried over the narrow sea. I trust rumor as far as it can swim, yet I fear the seas are full of clever fish. The king scoffs. Stannis broods. Renly jests. I write because the north holds patience and caution both, and because you see where others refuse. I beg your watchful eye. Should whispers grow wings, send word south. In service, Jon Arryn. Lyanna read the letter thrice beneath a sconce in the cold corridor, while servants bustled past carrying bolts of cloth. The notion of exiled dragons did not surprise her. She had seen a prince's polished dream shatter, shards flung across seas. What stirred inside her was something older, an echo of prophecy half heard in a burning room, smothered by pain and the perfume of crushed blue roses. She traced one finger over the line about clever fish. That night she went to the godswood alone, braving knee-deep powder under moonlight. The heart tree loomed, its face weeping red sap like tears turned to rubies. She knelt in the untouched snow, heedless of cold that burned her knees. In the hush, she whispered names the world had forgotten. Arthur Dayne, Gerald Hightower, Lewin Martell. She whispered Rhaegar's name last. Her breath frosted the old red lips of the weirwood. I am no part of your prophecy, she told the faces, her voice a rasp between Pine Creek and distant wolf howl. I am the North, and I will not be carved into songs of fire. Branches shivered overhead though no wind blew. The moon wavered hawkish between skeletal limbs. Somewhere near the shallow pool, an owl hooted. She rose, shook snow from her cloak, and left. Days later, the first of the Deepwood refugees to recover told an alarming tale. The lion cloak spoke in old Valyrian curses and followed a man they called Lord Brightroar. No Lannister she knew. She catalogued details. Maester Luwin combed histories, searching for mercenary companies using proud names to veil their leaders. At the same time, Kedge White-Eye reported unrest on the King's Road. Caravans raided by riders with black banners stitched with red, now and then accompanied by a tall woman clad in mismatched armor. The description pricked Lyanna's memory. Ashara Dane had favored lavender surcoats, but rumors claimed she lived still beyond the summer sea. Too coincidental? Or was fear morphing friend into phantom? To bolster morale and coin, Lyanna revived an old winter market festival, long emptied by war. She sent ravens to each holdfast, offering stalls beneath the castle's outer wall. Trappers hawked ermine pelts. Smiths displayed iron rings etched with moonstone. Crannogmen came in reed-wrapped canoes, loaded with lampreys preserved in beer. The courtyard exploded in color against all that white. Scarlet ribbons, yellow wax candles, a troop of skalds from Skagos who juggled axes. Children shrieked, riding a wooden direwolf on wheels. Old men wagered on hound fights. Ned grumbled, but allowed moderate betting. Lyanna moved among them wearing a simpler cloak of gray wool, no circlet. Only a strip of fur around her collar. She sipped mulled mead from a wooden mug, seeking to memorize each friendly laugh. At dusk, a troop of mummers performed an adaptation of Bale the Bard. Shara Stark rescuing herself from an ice tower. The performance twisted legend. This Shara disguised herself as a sellsword and slew Bale in single combat before absconding with his horse. The crowd hooted approval. Lyanna caught Ned's eye across the bonfire. He raised a brow as if to say, "So even stories can be cut to fit different throats." She smiled, acknowledging both amusement and warning. That same night, after the last pyre crackled to embers, she escorted Jon Snow, now walking sturdily on stub legs, across the yard. He clutched a carved wooden wolf Robber Glover had whittled at the festival. Lantern light flickered on his cheeks. He babbled nonsense syllables. One sounded like Nana. Lyanna's heart snagged. She kissed his curls. The child smelled of wood smoke and sweet bread. Works progressed on a new outer wall watchtower. An idea from Sir Roderick to increase visibility along a blind bend near the kennels. Lyanna insisted on climbing the scaffolding daily, boots slipping on iced planks while masons shouted warnings. Ned protested. She argued that a lady's eyes kept men honest. The tower rose, stone by raw stone, until it commanded a fine view of the shivering sea's distant shimmer. On windless mornings she could almost smell salt. Spring teased. A brief thaw iced the eaves to slush, then retreated on a blizzard's heels. One afternoon, as Lyanna sorted seat accounts, a raven from the wall delivered bleak tidings. Benjen's ranging party had vanished beyond the gorge. Only 2 horses returned, riderless, eyes wide with terror white. Lyanna felt the letters weight like a stone in her gut. She carried the parchment to Ned immediately. He read, lips pressed thin, said nothing. That night, he prayed at the heart tree until dawn, refusing even hot broth. Lyanna watched from a distance, grief gnawing but unspilled. She had grown accustomed to dread like this, poised between proof and hope. She refused funeral words until bones lay before her. 3 days later, a second raven, Benjen alive, wounded, brought to Castle Black by a wildling woman claiming safe passage under a banner of frost-stained weirwood leaves. The message ended there. Relief crashed through her like thaw flood. Ned wept once, quietly in her arms, then composed a reply demanding full report. Lyanna penned her own letter to Benjen, lacing it with warmth and scolding. Suspicion lingered like a bruise. A wildling woman under a sacred banner. Something beyond raiders stirred. Sir Roderick proposed sending another scout band. Ned countered they needed every rider to protect the soft roads. Lyanna listened, then sided with caution. No large force north until winter slackened, but a single swift messenger to gather detail. She selected Kedge White-Eye again, trusted, silent, adept at vanishing in snow, and ordered him to ride at first light. While preparations forged, she kept busy, reviewing marriage petitions sent by minor bannermen for her hand, some veiled in formal courtesy, others brazen in promise of alliances. She burned most, except one from House Umber's youngest son, Huther, whose letter admitted he preferred hunting board courting but wrote, Because my father swore he'd claw me pink if I did not." She laughed so hard Ned heard from the corridor. She kept Huther's letter to show Benjen when he returned. One gray afternoon, as she copied grain ledgers, Maester Luwin approached with parchment, trembling in his fingers. "Southern Raven," she read. "Lord Hoster Tully near death. Catelyn Tully now wed to Brandon's old friend Barbary Dustin's cousin through proxy to maintain alliances. River Run called banners against Greyjoy ships harrying the western coast. War edges frayed." Lyanna bit her lip. Had she altered one thread and loosened the entire tapestry? In the yard, she found Ned sparring with Robar. She waited until their blades crossed in final salute, then handed him the letter. His shoulders sagged. "Catelyn deserved a kinder fate," he said. "Perhaps she will shape one," Lyanna answered. Yet Hoster's impending death matched Ned's fears. Without Tully's strength, the Riverlands teetered. He and Lyanna spent midnight drafting contingency plans, increased grain for Moat Cailin garrisons, crossbow shipments to White Harbor, should Ironborn raids cut supply lines. By the time pale sunlight bled into the solar, their candle stubs were almost spent. Ned rubbed his temples. Lyanna poured him willow bark tea laced with mint. "We stand on a knife of ice," he muttered. "One misstep and the realm slides." "We hold Winterfell," she said. "Knives may bend before ancient stone." He smiled, weary but true. "Your faith births mine." Snow outside glowed luminous. They parted, each to separate duties. In the courtyard, a page shouted news. Kedge Wide-Eye had returned. Lyanna nearly spilled parchments, racing to the gatehouse. Kedge dismounted, frost caked to his hood, cheek bloody, but eyes bright. He knelt. "Riders on dead horses," he rasped. "Ghosts with eyes like pale flame." A hush swept the yard. Lyanna lifted him by the shoulders. "Tell me," he swallowed. "North of the Fist of the First Men, we found Benjen's trail. Blood on snow, deep boot prints. Then nothing. We searched 2 nights. On the third, shadows moved. I swear, Lady the Dead walked, skin blue, flesh stiff. They slew 2 of our party before dawn. Only I escaped." Gasps rippled. Some men crossed themselves with 7-pointed stars, others muttered old gods' prayers. Lyanna felt a chill colder than the air settle on her spine. "Benjen," she asked. "Alive, I think," Kedge breathed. "The wildling woman." She carried a horn of dragon glass and spoke of a pact older than men's histories. She said she'd lead him to a cave of children. His voice cracked from strain. Lyanna gripped his forearm. "Rest. Speak to Maester Luwin. We will hear all details." That night, Winterfell's high hall filled with uneasy murmurs. Lyanna spoke firmly. Tales of wights and frost demons were no reason to abandon reason. They would double watch rotations, stock lamp oil, prepare fire arrows. She invoked the names of Brandon Icebane and Sienna Snow, heroes who slew others in ancient songs. The speeches steadied most hearts, yet behind closed doors, Ned admitted fear. "I saw strange tracks on the way home from Dorne," he confessed quietly in her solar. "Bare human prints in fresh snow miles beyond any village. I dismissed them as lost wildlings. Now, we face what comes," she said. Her voice did not tremble. The lapis rose in her pocket felt heavier those days, as though its cold petals stored winter's secrets. Within a fortnight, 2 new raven scrolls upset the fragile calm. The first from the wall. Benjen's return confirmed, though raving about a pale king and refusing soft beds, begging stronger ramparts instead. The second from John Arryn, short and stark. "A red star has appeared above the stepstones, ominous sign." He ended, "Perhaps summer never truly returned." Lyanna laid both messages before Ned and Sir Roderick. They decided to summon every bannerman to Winterfell once roads allowed. Word spread. Ravens flapped. The north began to stir. Even House Karstark's grim riders pledged to arrive as soon as the first thaw cracked the river ice. On the ridgetop above Winterfell, the new watchtower reached its final height. A slender sentinel crowned with a ring of iron braziers. The masons asked Lyanna to set the last stone in place. She climbed the long ladder at sunrise, gloved hands stinging from cold. At the summit, with wind whipping her cloak to ribbons, she laid the stone and sealed it with mortar, while Ned, Roderick, and a score of men watched from below. As she pressed the final mark, her family's snarling direwolf sigil. Into the wet mix, she lifted her chin to the horizon. Cloud banks bruised with violet promised a storm. Yet far beyond, perhaps only a trick of the light, she thought she glimpsed a faint crimson sliver, streaking dawn's gray belly. A star, perhaps, or distant fire. She did not know, but she felt its pull like a thread tugging from the world's edge. She descended the ladder, boots biting rungs, face flushed, pupils bright. Ned met her at the base. "You glow," he said. "I am stone and fire both," she answered. She handed him her trowel. "Help me build the rest." Together, they lit the braziers. Flames leapt hungry and steady, red tongues licking the morning wind. Smoke coiled skyward in a single dark column, visible, she hoped, for leagues, an unspoken signal to friend and foe alike. The she-wolf stands, the pack gathers, the North does not kneel. 4 days later, Lord Wyman's scouts arrived breathless. A fleet of ironborn raiders had sacked Flint's Finger and now sailed north up the coast. Lyanna ordered horns blown, ravens aloft. As she donned boiled leather armor atop quilted wool, black, unadorned save a pale wolf embroidered at the breast, her mind raced. Defend White Harbor? Reinforce Flint's Finger? She conferred with Ned and Sir Roderick. They would split forces, send Roderick with 300 men to shore up the Fingers, while Lyanna herself rode southeast to Marshwood with a levy of archers to block inland raids. Ned would remain to guard Winterfell and rally incoming bannermen. As she mounted Frostbite at first light, Jon Snow toddled after across the yard, arms out. She leaned down, kissed his forehead. He reached for her braid, babbling. "I will return," she whispered, though the promise felt stern rather than soothing. She pressed a carved wooden direwolf, the pair to his toy, into the nurse's hand. "For him," she said. Ned next, clasping her wrist. "You ride into wolves' jaws." "I'm the wolf," she said. She squeezed his arm. "Keep the hearth bright." They departed in a shower of churned snow, banner snapping overhead, white direwolf on gray. Behind them, Winterfell's new watchtower brazier burned like a second sunrise. The North had answered calls to war before. This time, a woman led. Riders whispered as they galloped. Lady Lyanna rides as her brothers once did. Hard, eyes forward, heart forged of northern steel. They coursed south for 2 days through knee-deep powder, resting only when Frostbite's flanks trembled. At Barrowton they found the aftermath of an aborted raid, charred barns, scattered ash heaps where hayricks had burned. But the town still stood. Mayor Bram Blackbar helped them resupply. He reported seeing longships hug the coast under night's cover. Children spoke of black masts that breathe smoke. Lyanna studied the coastline map by firelight, marking likely landing creeks. On the third dawn, scouts sighted a reaver party near the village of Ironholt. 24 ironborn torching barley stores. Lyanna led her archers along a snowy ridge flanking the raiders. She ordered horns, silent. Ambush preferred surprise. At her signal, arrows hissed, cutting the low winter sun. Ironborn leaped, some falling with shafts between ribs. They tried forming shield wall, but snow hampered their footing. Lyanna rode Frostbite downslope, sword singing a savage harmony. She parried a notched axe, riposted, opened a reaver's throat. Blood steamed scarlet on snow. She passed through the melee, a blur of gray cloak and determined fury. Her men finished the fight in moments. When the last Ironborn struck knee and surrendered, she dismounted, chest heaving, snowflakes sizzling on her hot blade. The surviving raider chieftain glared through a swollen eye. "Who commands this bitch pack?" he spat. "Winter," she answered, and rammed the pommel into his brow, dropping him senseless. They bound prisoners, put out fires, buried small folk dead. She spared supplies for the homeless, grain from her own wagons, and diverted half her force to escort them toward Lord Riswell's holdfast. She bled inside for every frozen family, but hardened her gaze. Pity without action was a summer flower dead in frost. Within days, rumors spread that the she-wolf's host outmatched Ironborn cunning. Reavers abandoned some coastal raids altogether. Yet, new troubles brewed inland. A company of sellswords flying Bright Roar's crimson-gold lion encamped near the lonely hills, demanding passage tithe and boasting of southern gold to hire northern swords. Lyanna marched her levies west, across frozen marshes. The lion banner fluttered above a cluster of scrapwood palisades. She halted her men atop a dune of wind-crusted snow, surveying no more than 70 sellswords, some armored, most ragtag. But their leader sat astride a sorrel destrier wearing gilded plate and a gritham carved with roaring lion. She rode alone to parley, cloak whipping. When she lifted her visor, the bright-plated commander removed his helm in turn and revealed a young face, scarcely past 20, hair pale as maiden wheat. No Lannister kin. This was no scion but pretender. "I am Sir Owain Bright Roar," he declared, voice wavering though he puffed his chest. "Who stands before me?" "Lady Lyanna Stark," she answered. His expression flickered, surprise, then raw fear. She read it, and pressed. "You wear a stolen name and bleed villages. I offer choice. Disband and march south weaponless before dusk, or lie here unburied under snow wolves' piss." Murmurs ran among the sellswords. Sir Owain scrambled to respond, words tumbling. He had letters of marque from Lord Tywin. He had claim to lost sword Bright Roar. He sought only passage to White Harbor for official envoys. Lyanna spat into snow. "White Harbor receives envoys bearing peace, not torches." She signaled her archers lining the ridge. Sir Owain piled. Within a quarter hour, swords clattered to frosted ground. Lyanna oversaw surrender, confiscated arms, and pressed the sellswords into escorting waylaid peasants east to Widow's Watch. Sir Owain, stripped to wool tunic, begged to keep his gelding. She allowed horse, denying helm. "Ride south," she ordered. "Tell your buyer the north sells no loyalty." Thunderheads rolled overhead as they dispersed, heavy with new snow. Lyanna's men cheered quietly behind her. She did not bask. She counted casualties: 3 wounded archers, 1 dead spearman, a boy named Alan, who had dreamed of forging silver spoons for his betrothed. She saw his body wrapped for burying and prayed he'd forgive her haste. Hours later, riding back toward Marshwood, they encountered another messenger galloping hard. A Karstark outrider carrying Ned's seal. She read the missive under torch at a copse. "A raven from the wall. Benjen recovered, but speaks of cold shadows breaching the haunted forest. Night's Watch begs dragonglass, fire, men. Kings, south scoff. Ned writes, come home." Lyanna closed her eyes. The world conspired to tear them all into frantic pieces. She exhaled, tasting iron and pine. "We ride for Winterfell," she told her captains. 8, once. They covered the distance in 4 days, traveling near silent under curdled skies. Every mile she scanned tree lines for white eyes. Every snapping branch turned her blood quick. When Winterfell's towers finally speared the dawn horizon, she felt an ache she had not known since the Tower of Joy. The desperate pull to be inside walls, before the world folded upon itself. Ned met her at the gate, clad in traveling leathers as though ready to depart. Snow tipped his hair. Behind him, the courtyard buzzed with urgent preparations. Carts of pitch barrels stacked, smiths forging arrowheads tinged volcanic black. The watchtower brazier burned triple high, and once again she glimpsed, faint and distant, a red streak above dawn, like a wound not yet closed. Ned caught her hands before she dismounted. "Ravens from the Eyrie," he said. "Jon Arryn marches north with 3,000 men. He claims he comes to help." "Help with what?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Everything," Ned said, and embraced her so fiercely she felt new bruises form under armor. Sir Roderick strode forward, beard bristling. "Archmaester Nobbet has arrived too." Carrying books on the long night, his eyes flashed. They seek the truth in pages while shadows gather. Lyanna swung off frostbite, numb exhaustion melting beneath cold stone ground. "Then we give them both steel and lore," she said. "But first, I must see Jon." She hurried to the nursery. Jon Snow stood in his cradle's center now, clutching rails, eyes bright. At her entrance he squealed, reaching. She scooped him up, heart loosening. He pressed the carved wolf into her cheek. She whispered a vow. "This child will live past winter's longest night." Outside, horns signaled approaching riders. She placed Jon into the nurse's arms, then fastened her cloak. On her belt, the keys of Winterfell jingled clear as bells calling soldiers to prayer. She strode toward the gatehouse, snow hissing beneath her boots like silent applause. She felt bruised, tired, alive. Alive more fiercely than ever, as though the scythe of ice whirled near but missed by breath. When she reached the rampart and gazed south, faint banners crept through the snow haze. Arryn falcon on sky, Manderly merman even larger, numberless spears glittering. The north answered. The Vale answered. Perhaps even distant lords would answer now. She braced her hands on the parapet, wind whipping hair free. So begin the wars, no mortal songs prepared. Night waits with open jaws, she thought. But wolves hunt best in darkness. She turned to Ned. "Open the gates," she said. Winterfell's iron portcullis rose, chains groaning. And if the world beyond held doom in its marrow, the castle answered with stone older than fear, and a woman who carried both ice and fire in her veins. Neither conquered, neither denied, only blended into a strength, not yet named by prophecy. The gathering banners approached. Lyanna Stark stood her ground, keys burning cold at her waist, and prepared to write the next verses of a song the South had never imagined. One in which the living snow howled loud enough to drown dragons, lions, and all the restless dead. Ah, Kabdi. Snow sifted down in endless, whispering curtains as Lord Jon Arryn's column wound toward Winterfell, the long white road swallowing sound, until only the muted clop of hooves and the creak of leather harnesses marked their passage. From the rampart, Lyanna watched the banners emerge. The sky-blue falcon of the Eyrie, the crescent moon of House Royce, a scattering of red wyverns from Gulltown companies, and, impossible yet real, the snarling merman of White Harbor coming from the south, for Wyman Manderly had doubled back to escort the hand. Steel glimmered dull beneath frost. Thousands of spearheads carried beneath woolen cloaks dusted ghost pale. It was a band sized for war, but theirs marched with eerie quiet, as though those ranks too could feel the breath of something vast and unseen pressing at their shoulders. Lyanna's own men lined the walk beside her, stewards, smiths, and soldiers alike, each clutching a bough or bill, eyes wary. A fine powder of new snow sifted across their helms. Ned stood to her right, mailed hand resting on the high stone lip. Beyond him, Jon Arryn rode in the forefront of his host, bronzed mail half hidden beneath a fur mantle as white as eagle feathers. When he drew near enough to hail the walls, he lifted one gauntleted hand. The gesture was formal, but Lyanna saw a fatigue in his shoulders that had not been there at King's Landing, a gravity which made the old falcon seem twice his years. "Open the gate," Lyanna ordered. The portcullis ground upward, chains rattling harsh against cold cogs. Snow-laden air rushed inward as Arryn's vanguard filed between looming towers. The first rank of falcon guards dismounted with soldierly snap. Behind, mounted knights wheeled their destriers aside for baggage wagons laden with casks, crates, and rolled carpets bound in wax cloth. Lyanna descended the inner stair, cloak snapping behind like a hunting flag. She met Jon Arryn in the bailey, the sky a vast pewter bowl above. "My lord hand," she greeted, dipping her head. "Winterfell welcomes you." "And the Eyrie returns the courtesy, Lady Lyanna," he answered, voice carrying despite the hush. Older, hoarser than she remembered. The abbard of his longsword, eagle's talon, thumped against his thigh when he bowed. He straightened and pressed gloved fingers to hers in greeting. His palm trembled. "I ride bearing storms and questions. Forgive the intrusion. The North forgives what it must," Lyanna replied. She indicated Ned, who clasped the hand's arm with brotherly warmth. Formalities finished quickly. Erin's guards directing wagons to the granaries, Royce men guiding horses to the stables. Yet tension lingered, palpable as the crackle of winter in rime-coated branches. Within the great hall, braziers flared, casting amber light over rush-strewn floors. Benches groaned under the weight of newcomers shrugging off snow-stiff cloaks. Maester Leuven oversaw servants ladling onion broth, spiced with mace into wooden bowls. Lyanna sat upon her wolf-carved chair. Jon Arryn, Ned, and Lord Wyman made a small semicircle at trestle tables drawn near the hearth. They ate first in silence, warming half-frozen hands on steaming cups, until Arryn set spoon aside. "I ride north with ill tidings," he began without ornament. "Letters from the Watch speak of dead things stalking forest trails. My ravens to Dragonstone returned unanswered. Lord Stannis claims black sails haunt Shipbreaker's Bay. In the Reach, small folk whisper that their fields birth frost at midnight, though no snow lies south of the Mandarin living memory. And now this red star." He glanced toward the shuttered windows as if the comet's smear might burst into the hall unbidden. "Folk call it a sword." Ned folded arms. "We have seen signs. Vengeance Company found walking corpses. Our watchtower burns day and night. The She-Wolf's riders skirmish ironborn raiders bearing strange lion banners. The realm phrase, my lord." "Nender." Lord Wyman rumbled concurrence, sliding a scroll across to Arryn. "Ship manifests out of White Harbor show unusual orders. Pitch and cask loads, dried pine, heavy oils. Craftsman claims southern merchants pay thrice over to buy any light that burns hot and long. Preparing for more than hearth fires, I fear." Arryn's gray eyes tracked the parchment list. "And King Robert, he would call these fears children's stories." "Mandan Ratho." Lyanna considered Robert's broad smile, the sorrow behind his cups. "He must be made to see, or the North will stand alone." She turned to the hand. "You brought soldiers, 3,000 from the Vale, 1,000 of Manderley's harbor watch. Archers mostly." Arryn's mouth tightened. "Enough to hold a line, perhaps. Not enough to face a winter host from legend." "Legends bleed when cut," Ned murmured, but the words felt thin in the heavy air. They spent hours thrashing details. Supply routes, rider posts, beacon hills marked on Arryn's newly inked maps. When the meeting recessed for a second meal, Lyanna stepped aside, letting flickering torchlight glaze the stone walls. Arryn joined her quietly near the dais. "I see the change in you," he said, voice soft. "The Lyanna I glimpsed years ago at Harrenhal was a wildfire spark. You burn steadier now." "We all burned," she answered. "I can no longer afford to blaze uncontrolled." He nodded. "I brought you something." From a leather pouch, he withdrew a narrow cylinder. Folded hide bound with a wax seal stamped by the Citadel's timeless tower and crown. Archmaester Narbert sailed into Gulltown with this treatise on dragonglass and Valyrian lore. He insisted I deliver it personally. Lyanna accepted the cylinder, unrolling aged parchment etched in precise black hand. Among drawings of obsidian spearheads and runic glyphs, one illustration caught her eye. A double-edged dagger carved in jagged volcanic glass, tip wreathed by stylized flames. Beneath, a scrawl by Narbert's own quill. "Fire is memory. Ice is forgetting. Only the union of shard and blaze may wound the night." She exhaled, feeling both weight and chill. Is this wisdom, or the riddling of scholars? "Perhaps both," Arryn said. "Wisdom often hides in riddles until need forces us to read them plainly." She curled the parchment. "I will need time to translate the glyphs. Time may prove scarce." Arryn's lined face softened. "Yet I trust Winterfell to carve meaning from stone. It always has." By the week's end, fresh legions of bannermen poured through the outer gate. Karstark spears, amber and blue siren banners of House Talhart, Crannog men drifting in reed boats, poled up the White Knife then overland on sledges. Pitch barrels stacked high beneath awnings. A new forge yard rose near the kennels, bellows groaning night and day. Maester Leuven rationed vellum for ravens as messages multiplied faster than parchment rolls. Lyanna slept little. though fatigued, tugged her bones. Each dawn she walked ramparts with kedge-white eye, reviewing torch signals for the line of forts they named the Wolf's Lantern Chain. Each dusk she knelt by Jon Snow's cradle, whispering stories of first men and children of the forest. The child tracked her voice with solemn gray eyes. Once, when she paused to yawn, he pressed small fingers to her mouth as if shushing her weariness. The simple touch renewed her. On the second new moon following Aaron's arrival, Benjen Stark came home. A horn trembled from the watchtower. One blast, then another. Lyanna froze mid-council. She knew those notes. Riders inbound. The atmosphere in the hall snapped taut. She strode to the yard in time to see a handful of black-cloaked figures approaching, torches flickering violet in a low fog. Benjen rode at their head astride a shaggy Garin with a silver mane. His gaunt face bore still healing scratches. Ice rimed his beard, but his eyes shone bright with urgent life. When he dismounted, Lyanna crushed him to her chest, armor clanking. He winced, but returned the embrace fervently. "Brother," she rasped. "We feared." "I walked the ice and returned," he answered, voice a rasp. Ned reached them, arms wrapping both siblings. For a heartbeat, winter itself seemed to hold its breath. The three Starks woven together. Once inside, Benjen relayed his tale before the Bannerman's commanders and the lordly council, how his ranging tracked mysterious hoofprints circling a ring fort carved into a hill of blue-tinted stone. How, one night, torches guttered to eerie azure and a wind shrieked like broken glass. How the dead rose, skin translucent, eyes burning cold flame, and his brothers died screaming. He described his rescue by a wildling woman swaddled in weirwood leaf cloaks, her hair white as hoarfrost. She called herself Lyanna, of the then, Benjen said, yet her tongue was older. She bore an obsidian horn that sang when she blew it, one note that shattered frost and sent the whites stumbling back. He produced that very horn now, drawing it from goat hide. Its black surface glimmered with subtle red striations, like veins of ancient fire. She gave it to me, telling me to bring the song south. Gasps rippled. Archmaester Narbert leaned in, spectacles gleaming like twin moons. "Dragon glass uniquely resonant," he breathed. Could this be the storm singer of Valyrian myth? Lyanna hefted the horn. It weighed less than expected, cold yet humming faint within her palm. She imagined its note rolling across snowy forests. "We test it, carefully," she said, "and craft more weapons of obsidian. We lack quarries of such stone," Wyman objected. Ned rubbed his jaw. "Dragonstone's cliffs, but Stannis would sooner part with his beard." "Then I will ask," Lyanna said, simple as declaring sunrise. The others stared. She ignored them. "Send a raven. The North needs dragonglass for the realm's survival. If the Lord of Dragonstone refuses, we will mine obsidian from Skagos or beyond. But the sea ice may not break before high summer. We cannot wait." The decree carried. Smiths began experimenting, embedding slivers of broken arrowhead obsidian inside steel casing. Narbert consulted dusty tomes, instructing them to temper blades with repeated quenching in oil and salt water to marry shard with iron. Sparks flew night-long. Winterfell rang with the music, both ancient and new. That same week, scouts returned from the lonely hills with news. The Bright Roar Sellswords had reformed, rallying under a new patron. Sir Oren claimed patronage now from Casterly Rock, though Lannister ravens disavowed him. Worse, the Sellswords marched not south but east along the King's Road, spreading rumors that Winterfell prepared a northern rebellion. Villages vacillated between terror and confusion. Some turned Sellsword camps away, others offered grain to avoid plunder. Ned urged a direct strike. Jon Arryn counseled caution. Too many threats to risk scattering troops. Lyanna listened, weighing. Under thinning clouds, she walked Winterfell's quiet godswood with Benjen. The heart tree's red leaves fluttered, their veins heavy with half-frozen sap. Benjen leaned on his staff, gaze far away. "There's a hush in the forest now," he said. "Birds flee at noon, as if daylight offends." "The dead stir," she answered. She knelt, brushing snow from a knotted root. "Tell me of Lyanna." Benjen's eyes warmed. She spoke of a pact. First men and children. Blood for ice. She said prophecy bends when sung by the living. She said a wolf mother would challenge night with a horn call that shapes dawn's blade. He half smiled. "She meant you." Lyanna scoffed gently. "I am no mother, unless siblings count." But the words lodged. Thorn sharp. Wolf mother. She pictured Jon Snow's tiny fingers. His quiet gaze. Benjen eyed her sidelong. She spoke of a child shadowed by both dragon and wolf. Her breath plumed. She stared at the weirwood's face, red tears frozen on white bark. The tree seemed to watch back, patient, expectant. "Promise, Prince." She gripped a low branch until cold bit skin. "I vowed to protect," she whispered. "Then do as you have." Benjen touched her elbow. "But heed the old magic too." K. Ainjain, Kandan. By late winter's crest, the North's muster filled every guest hall and spare barn, yet still ravens arrived daily. Umbers fighting skirmishes with Ironborn in the Bay of Seals. Riswell outriders glimpsing pale shadows beyond the Barrowlands. Panic threatened to fracture the fragile coalition. Lyanna convened a great council in the yard, open to lords, petty knights, and even smallfolk headmen. A raised platform of hewn logs served her dais. Torches ringed the perimeter against deepening dusk. Snow still fell, swirling around orange fire halos. She stepped forward, clad in quilted mail the color of moonlit charcoal. A wolf fur mantle across shoulders. The lapis rose Robert gave her pinned to the mantle at her throat. Blue petals glowing like trapped twilight. The obsidian horn dangled at her belt. "People of the North," she began, voice carrying between stone walls. "Years ago we bled against a mad king and ended his fire. Now another doom approaches, cold as old graves, unseen by walls of city or pride. But wolves know winter. We do not kneel to storms. We weather them together." "Nancho." Murmurs rippled. Some approving, some fearful. "A threat rises beyond the wall," she continued. "My brother saw dead men walk. Ironborn and sellswords test our coastlines. Yet here we stand. Stark, Arryn, Manderly, Karstark, Glover, Tallheart, Risewell, Lord and Crofter alike. The North holds because its people hold each other." She drew the obsidian horn, raising it for all to see. "This was gifted by those who dwell in snows deeper than any we remember. They call it the Song of Sundering. They say its note can break the night's march." She paused, letting the torches flicker on its black polished curves. "I believe, yet belief alone saves no hearth. Action does. Honor does." She lifted the horn to her lips. A hush fell so complete snowflakes seemed arrested mid-air. Ned's eyes widened. Benjen inclined his head solemnly. Lyanna inhaled, feeling the horn's cold rim bite. She blew. The sound that poured forth was no trumpet call. It was a single pure chord, low as the groan of icebergs and bright as sun, striking glacial crests. It vibrated through bone, through stone, through lungs, an ancient language of note rather than word. Torches flickered outward, not extinguishing but bending their flames toward the sound. Snowflakes paused, swirling shapes moving in patterns as if choreographed by the echo. Even the heart tree leaves beyond the walls trembled. When the call faded, silence roared in its absence. Then, from battlements, watchmen cried, "Aurora!" Heads tilted skyward. Overhead, the night beyond the swirling snow blossomed in curtains of green and violet light. The Aurora Borealis, brighter than any had seen in living memory, dancing sinuously above Winterfell. Gasps and cries escaped throats unused to wonder. Lyanna lowered the horn, breath fogging strong. "The old powers awaken," she said softly, though her words carried. "They awaken for all of us." Cheeks flushed. Men and women knelt, some in prayer, others merely to brace trembling legs. The fear that had hovered like thick frost seemed to shatter, replaced by fierce astonishment. Lyanna turned, meeting Jon Arryn's gaze across the platform. The hand's eyes brimmed, He bowed his head. That night, Winterfell's walls rang with renewed purpose. Quarrels scraped from barracks, forges roared like captive drakes. Children played at stabbing straw, ice wraiths, with sticks tipped in chalk. Even the direwolves in the kennels howled harmony with the bright sky. Lyanna walked alone after midnight, traversing the outer rampart beneath rainbow curtains overhead. The horn hung heavy at her hip. She paused, shivering not from cold but from echo of power. On the snowy battlement top, she spotted Maester Lewin examining aurora shifts with a slate board. Narbert scribbled furious notes on spectral wavelengths. She left them, moving to the shadowed corner above the Godswood Gate. Below, the pond glowed faint green from the lights above. The heart tree's face seemed alive, mouth curved in half-smile. Lyanna released a sigh, a blend of fatigue, awe, dread. She pressed palm to cold stone Merlin. Somewhere inside, a thread of certainty pulled tight. This was prelude, not culmination. The horn's note had awoken more than hope. It had sent a message too into night's silent fields. She whispered to the wind, "Come then, darkness, the wolf mother calls." Gai, gai. Spring's official turn came marked only by a slight thinning of the relentless snowfall, and by crows' sudden reappearance, croaking black punctuation on white eaves. Under Aaron's guidance, a war council drafted 3 defensive rings. An inner ring anchored on Winterfell and its lantern chain. A middle ring of beacon towers spanning Deepwood Motte to Last Hearth. And an outer scouting ring patrolled by mixed units of Night's Watch veterans and Northmen outriders, each supplied with copper-wired arrows tipped in dragon-glass shards. Stannis Baratheon answered Lyanna's raven at last, grudging but affirmative. A galley laden with chipped obsidian from Dragonstone's broken ridges set sail for White Harbor, escorted by 2 war cogs. In the letter Stannis wrote, "The realm is owed duty. See it repaid." No flourish, no warmth, but the stone would come. Soon after, word arrived from King's Landing. King Robert commanded Ned South to serve again as Warden of the North at the small council. "Where your voice may cool the hand's weary caution." Ned prepared, but Lyanna insisted he remain until incoming hosts solidified. She penned a firm reply to Robert. Brotherly, respectful, terminant. The messenger carried it on a fleet gelding. The answer would take weeks. Meanwhile, skirmishers reported Bright Roar's company retreating, but Ironborn raids intensified. Lyanna rode again, this time with a mixed battalion of Royce heavy infantry and Karstark lances. Southwest down icy marsh tracks, where smoke marked another ransacked village. They arrived to find charred shells of huts, but survivors hid beneath a root cellar. A toddler clutched an alder branch carved into wolf shape. The same toy there hadn't been enough of to distribute months earlier. Lyanna knelt, offering her own water skin. The child drank in, hiccuping sobs. Fury surged within her like molten iron, but she tamped it, stroking the child's hair until cries quieted. That night, camped beneath leafless birches, she traced maps by torch. A courier hawk from Winterfell landed on her gauntlet-bearing Kedge's hurried scrawl. Scouts at the Weeping Water found lions again, led by a woman in lavender armor. Ashara Dane? The name whirled like flurry. No proof, but rumor refused to die. If true, the South's shadows lengthened. She ordered double watch. Dawn saw them press on, ride-meeting raid parties. Stags of the Trident Crest, seldom among them. Twice they clashed. Victory swift but bitter. Ironborn revel in resistance. They burn homes, then slip back to sea. Frost-rimmed tides lapped at blackened piers, mocking. In early evening, a horn blast from the forward outriders signaled enemy holdout in abandoned holdfast. Lyanna led a flanking maneuver, her cloak streaming, frostbite thundering. But as they crested a ridge, she jerked reins. Below, a battle already raged. Ironborn warcry mingling with inhuman shrieks. Shapes darted between ruined wall fragments, raiders hacking at figures whose eyes blazed cerulean even in dusk gloom. Whites, ironborn axes bit undead flesh that did not bleed. The raiders cried out, panicked. The whites closed, bone-white hands gripping. One ironborn captain flailed, decapitated the nearest creature, Yet the headless corpse fought on, staggering. Lyanna tasted copper fear. "Loose arrows," she ordered, voice cracking across the ridge. Archers fired dragonglass shafts. Where they struck, whites erupted in hoarfrost and fell still. The Ironborn, bewildered, staggered back. Lyanna spurred frostbite downslope, Royce infantry pounding behind. She hacked a white through clavicle, feeling her obsidian-edged sword bite with muted crack. The creature's icy eyes dimmed. Scattered survivors rallied behind her Northman ranks. Within moments the whites lay shattered, limbs twitching before falling inert. Silence followed, thick as the snow-laden clouds. An Ironborn raider, pockmarked youth with salt-rusted helm, dropped to his knees before Lyanna, torn between defiance and awe. "What magic do you wield, Wolf Queen?" he croaked. "Fire and memory," she answered, panting. The words echoed Narbert's treatise. She scanned the field. 15 dead Ironborn, 10 whites. Once wildlings perhaps, or watched deserters. Night's terror crept too close. She ordered pyres built. Whites burned with the Ironborn dead to spare them a second rising. Flames licked sky while smoke coiled toward the aurora, still faintly visible even before full dark. Royce men muttered holy prayers. Karstark lancers gripped sword hilts white. Lyanna stood vigilant until the last bone cracked under fire. At dawn she dispatched ravens, one to Ned. Undead sighted south of Lonely Hills. Another to Castle Black. Whites crossing the wall. The message begged quick answer. How? Where? Her host turned north again, urgency a drumbeat in every hoofprint. They reached Winterfell in under 4 days, men gaunt, eyes rimmed red, but bearing proof. Charred skulls that glittered faint blue even in ashes. Narbert studied them with trembling fascination. Lewin strengthened watch protocols. It was then that banners of House Reed emerged from the neck, Lord Howland arriving atop a shaggy chestnut, mud still caking his boots. He bowed before Lyanna in the yard, awkward as though unused to court rules. "Lady," he greeted, voice soft as marsh wind. The swamp's whisper of the waxing eye, a sign of watchers waking. The children of the forest send warning. Heart trees cry in sap darker than night. Lyanna felt a chill deeper than winter. Did they speak of weapons? Howland produced a bundled satchel. Inside lay flaked black stone arrowheads carved in swirling patterns. Smaller and finer than Winterfell's smiths managed. "Gift from Greenseers," he said. "Said to break the chains of cold. Obsidian from the swamps. Rare." She bowed her thanks. "We will test them." Later, by her chamber hearth, she unfurled Narbert's scroll again, overlaying Howland's arrowheads atop sketched glyphs. The patterns matched. Spiral grooves mirroring celestial whorls. She traced lines with gloved fingertip, the illuminations swirling like frozen stars. The phrase flickered again. Fire is memory, ice is forgetting. What did it mean? She remembered Rhaegar's whispered song, "Ice and fire, the prince foreseen." She thought of Jon Snow, sleeping upstairs wrapped in gray furs. Tired to marrow, she drifted into uneasy slumber, where dream and memory mingled. A tower bathed in dawn-colored blood, blue roses blooming from cracks, white shadows reaching with frost-glass fingers. In that dream she blew the obsidian horn again, but the note shattered the tower walls, freeing not terror but bright dawn. A knock roused her. Dawn's first ray stretched palely. Ned stood, eyes red-rimmed. "Raven from the wall," he murmured, handing parchment sealed by black wax. Lyanna broke it open, scanning. Her heartbeat thudded. "The wall is breached," she whispered. "An ice fissure half a league wide at the gorge. Lord Commander Jor calls every bannerman north." Ned's face went ashen. "Then we ride to war." She rose, fastening her cloak. "Not war," she said, voice steely. "Survival." She strode to the window. Outside, Winterfell's yard bustled already. Troops drilling, quartermasters stacking crates, smoke billowing from forges. She lifted the obsidian horn from a peg, slung its leather strap across her chest. "Send messengers to Aaron Manderly, Karstark. Muster at the gift. Tell Wyman to ready his fleet to ferry obsidian. We march at dusk." "Mao." Ned placed hand on her shoulder. "I will command the host." She met his gaze. "We command together. The pack moves as one." He nodded, jaw clenched. They exited side by side. In the corridor they passed Milla, carrying John Dotwall. The babe gurgled, reaching for Lyanna. She halted, pressing a kiss to his forehead. Beneath his swaddling, a copper medallion of a direwolf hung. "Benjen's gift." She tucked it close, whispering, "Watch for dawn, little wolf." In the yard, she mounted Frostbite once more, armor strapped, sword at her hip, new obsidian dagger across her chest. Benjen rode out from stables in black cloak trimmed white. Lord Aaron approached, helm under arm. "Whatever lies beyond that breach," he said, "we'll face it. Together." She agreed. She raised the horn to her lips a second time. The note rang truer now, echoing across stone and snow, rolling outward in unseen waves. Ravens stirred atop rookeries. Wolves beyond the walls answered with long, unearthly howls. She felt the castle itself vibrate, as though the old gods hammered drums beneath the roots. When the sound dwindled, silence fell, an anticipatory hush brimming with fear and with determination both. Lyanna lowered the horn and turned to her assembled captains. "Ride," she commanded. "Lights to the dark, wolves to the breach. We meet the night on our own terms." Hooves thudded, banners snapped, gates groaned. Winterfell's army streamed forth. Stark gray, Arryn blue, Karstark white, Manderley sea green, Reed swamp brown. The black of the night's watch among them, like a seam of night stitched through the cloth of day. Obsidian-tipped arrows filled quivers, pitch barrels rattled on sledges. Lyanna rode at the host's spear point, Frostbite's breath pluming. They crossed leaf-bare forests where heart trees seemed to bow. They forded rivers rimmed in armor-thick ice. They slept in shifting watch camps where auroras fought overhead. And always the comet's red blade hovered in the sky, a scar across heavens, as though marking the path. At the Gift's southern edge they met the shattered wall. Moonlight revealed the breach. Ice cliffs split like a sundered cathedral window. Shards taller than towers strewn across glacial plains. Beyond yawned the dark north. Quiet. Too quiet. Plumes of unnatural fog drifted, coiling, birthing shapes that dissolved when fire arrows hissed overhead. Lyanna dismounted near the cold rubble, Benjen beside her, Aaron and Ned arriving on foot. They stared into the gap, where humanity's bulwark had cracked. Wind moaned through the break, chilling marrow. Benjen drew his sword, blade ringing high. "We rebuild or we die," he said. "Both, if need be," Lyanna replied. She unslung the horn. "The night has a voice. Let the north answer." She raised the horn a third time. The note thundered across the frozen waste, splintering stars, making even the ground hum. It carried memory. Children's laughter, forge song, wolf howl, the roar of childbirth, a heart buried in sand, the susurrus of barley swaying before rot. It carried fire in every breath the north had ever warmed. Lights blossomed in the sky again, wilder, red mingling emerald, unfurling banners of impossible color. In that radiance, the figures beyond the gap stirred. Ice wraiths gleaming, giants of frost. Shadows wearing rags of half-life. But for the first time they paused, heads tilting not in hunger but in wary awe at the song's power. Lyanna finished on a descending sigh. She lowered the horn. Silence fractured when thousands of obsidian arrowheads were drawn from quivers, metal scraping wood. A sound like flint striking flint. Fires blazed along embankments, reflected in each soldier's eyes. The watchers advanced, the living braced. Lyanna lifted her sword, voice clear above the howl of the freezing wind. "For Winterfell, for the realm of the living, let memory burn the night." And as the first wave of white shadows broke against their fire-lit line, steel met silence, dragonglass met deathless flesh, and dawn, pale and uncertain, began to spread behind the red sword of the comet, promising that though winter bore its darkest fangs, the she-wolf's pack would answer, and the embers of life would flare bright upon the snow. "Yeah, Edinbo," Ice shattered beneath the first assault. A tremor coursed through the ruin of the wall, splinters of frozen stone skittering across the glacier as the white horde pressed into the gap. They moved like drifting snow, quiet, relentless, heedless of arrows that flickered from the rampart fires and fell short of living targets. Only when obsidian-tipped shafts found their mark did the creatures falter, limbs dissolving to ragged powder. But countless more surged forward, eyes phosphorescent blue, flesh mottled in frost crystal, mouths twisted in silent mockery of life. Lyanna urged Frostbite toward the van, sword held high. Flames licked the blade, where the smiths had inlaid a seam of dragonglass along the fuller. Each brandish flung sparks that hissed against the snow. Benjen ranged to her right, black cloak snapping, wolf-toothed polearm sweeping wide arcs. Ned rode on her left, ice lifted two-handed, its Valyrian ripples darkening with each bright flash of aurora overhead. Around the northern banners flared, Karstark sunbursts, Glover red hands, Aaron falcons etched in silvered ice. Drums pounded behind the lines, a deep, primal thunder to match the horn's fading echo. When the first rank of whites reached the hastily dug palisade at the breach, fire arrows streaked downward. Pitchpots erupted. Blue flame met orange, and steam roared upward in clouds so thick they congealed into hoarfrost upon iron helms. The dead tried to climb, clawing with black nails. Every blow from living steel shattered fingers, but only dragonglass or fire stilled them forever. A Glover sergeant slammed his torch into a shrieking, reanimated free folk child. Sparks burst, and the creature fell to cinders. Yet behind it pressed others. Dozens, then hundreds. "Form the crescent," Lyanna cried. Royce kettledrums answered, and armored men advanced in a sweeping arc, shields locking to present an obsidian-studded wall. The first true clash came like thunder rolling across the ice. White bodies slammed into shields, their brittle bones snapping under impact. Spears shot outward through slits, squares of black crystal ripping into undead torsos, ripping memory back from forgetting. The air turned acrid with melted frost and corpse smoke. A giant lumbered into view, pale as moonset, half its ribcage exposed where flesh had flaked away, eyes twin glaciers. It swung a tree trunk capped in shards of ice. The first stroke sent 6 men flying, shields splintering. Lyanna spurred Frostbite straight at the behemoth, heart thrumming like a forge bellows. Behind her kedge-white eye unleashed a crimson signal flare. Archers on the heights wheeled to target. Obsidian javelins soared through the swirling lights of the aurora. Most shattered harmlessly against the giant's icy hide. Still, it advanced, trunk sithing wide. Lyanna ducked beneath, frost splintering along her pauldrons, and drove her blade through the giant's bare knee joint. The dragonglass seam cut deep. A crack spidered upward through ancient bone. The giant groaned, a sound like avalanches, and toppled backward, crushing a knot of whites. Benjen leapt, burying his obsidian axe into the creature's skull. A gush of white vapor exhaled from its mouth, and it was still. Cheering caught in throats as a shadow glided overhead, eclipsing the star-stained sky. A monstrous ice wyvern dove from the northern dark, wings glittering in sheets of diamond frost. Its scream pierced marrow, and an arc of pale flame that burned cold, spewed from its jaws, crystallizing the breath of living men mid-shout. Shields froze to fingers, mail buckled under sudden sheaths of rime. Wyvern scales echoed aurora hues, greens, purples, and at its nape rode a rider clad in spiked armor of translucent crystal. Eyes no color at all, mouth silent behind a helm shaped like a fanged viper. The knight's lieutenant. Soldiers faltered, terror rising. The beast banked, angling for the packed heart of the host. Lyanna kicked Frostbite forward across franked bodies and hammered the pommel of her sword against her dented gorget. "Archers to me!" she shouted. Kedge sprinted with a troop of Vale longbowmen. Bundled under his arm, he bore a single, oversized quarrel. Shaft of weirwood, head of polished black glass that glimmered with internal fire. "The wind's wrong for elevation," Kedge cried. "Then change it," Lyanna snapped. He inhaled, eyes narrowing. Flame signalers hurled pitch onto a circle of ground, a stone's throw ahead. The fire blossomed, heat rippling. As the wyvern thundered lower, wings stirring hurricane blasts of snow, a thermal gust lifted from the blaze, catching the incoming downdraft. The beast wobbled, wingtip clipping the invisible pillar of warmth. In that heartbeat, Kedge fired. The dragonglass quarrel streaked upward in a shimmer of dusk fire, piercing the wyvern's chest just behind the splayed foreclaw dot. A fissure of radiant cracks exploded across its scales. The cold flame in its throat flickered into smoky gray. It shrieked, banking wild. The crystal rider clutched reins of woven sinew, but the jolt flung him sideways. He tumbled, disappearing into darkness as the wyvern struggled westward, a comet of shattered frost trailing behind. Relief surged like hot wine, but whites pressed again. On the right flank, the Karstark line bent toward collapse. Sergeant Darren Karstark screamed for reinforcement as skeletal figures wielding blades of night glass hacked through their ranks. Ned spurred, ice-cleaving arcs that left luminous trails. Lyanna joined, her sword singing. She drove a wedge to split the undead knot, batting aside spitting shards of night crystal with the flat of her steel, counter-thrusting dragonglass into rotted eye sockets. Aaron mailed knights hewed at whites, with shields rimmed in glowing copper. Each blow rang like struck bellstone. Hours bled from night to ice-pink dawn. Still they fought, exhaustion gnawing muscle. Frostbite's nostrils steamed ragged. Ned cradled a rent in his left pauldron where black glass had scored flesh. Vengean's polearm broke, replaced by a scavenged obsidian-edged mace. Yet for every yard lost they won 2 back. The aurora dimmed as sun's first light spilled over the broken wall. The dead lurched backward, disoriented. At sunrise they seemed to slow, as if some leash pulled them from the fight. And then they withdrew, first in trickling clusters, then in mass retreat, slipping between ice spires, melting into pre-dawn haze. Trumpeters blew halt. Men slumped amid steaming piles of shattered corpses that evaporated to drifting snow. The living exhaled disbelief. Lyanna dismounted, legs trembling, and planted her sword tip in packed snow. She scanned field and breach, miles of broken ice, dead giants felled, banners tattered but upright. Cheers rose but did not swell. The survivors were too spent for jubilation. Fires sputtered, smoke curling against warming copper sky. Benjen pressed a flask into her hand, pine sap brandy that scorched throat and set breath aflame. She drank, eyes stinging. John Arryn approached with Lord Wyman. The hand's armor was dented, blue mantle torn, but his gaze burned bright. "We stand," he said simply. "For now," she answered. "But they learned. Then so must we." He paused, listening to the groaning glacier. "We cannot hold here in open field. The breach must be sealed." Narbert arrived, clutching broken fragments of glassy ice. "The fissure runs deeper than we feared," he warned. "No mortal mortar will bind it before next dusk." "We build a firewall," Lyanna declared. "Pitch, timber, dragonglass dust. A barrier of flame until the stones hold." Wyman scratched his beard. "We'd need tar cauldrons from every ship in White Harbor, plus rush bales from the gift villages." "Send ravens," Lyanna said. "Strip our own wagons. Tonight the breach burns so bright it blinds gods." Commands rippled. Fatigue-heavy soldiers found new vigor on Purpose Spear Point. While healers bound wounds with strips torn from cloaks, engineers staked tall frames of ash wood along the gap, weaving them tight with bowstrings and hammered nails. Veil sappers coated lattice surfaces with tar, drawn from barrels cracked open by pickaxes, and warmed over quick-lit braziers. Karstark hunters ranged ahead, spearing straggling whites in the half-melted snowdrifts. Glover smiths rebuilt shattered spearheads, forging dragonglass dust into heated iron paste to coat tips. By mid-morning, the sun vanished behind brooding storm clouds. Temperature plummeted, breath turned steely again. Across the devastated field, chill fog regathered in unnatural eddies. Eyes watched from beyond the breach, pale dots winking between shards of ice. Yet the enemy did not charge. Instead, a rhythmic pulse of frost mist rose and fell, like a massed army breathing as one. Wind carried faint keening. Not song, not scream, but something hungrier. Scouts returned with grim tidings. Nigh on 1,500 dead remained out there, reorganizing under shadow figures in frost crystal armor. One man whispered a legend. The Night King had lesser lieutenants. Generals forged each solstice. No one answered. Lyanna oversaw firewall construction personally, climbing scaffolds, hammering nails, hauling rush bales on her shoulder, though commanders protested. Frostbite stood tethered near a brazier, tail flicking. Ned joined with bandaged arm. Together they wove lengths of ship's rope soaked in oil through the lattice so flame could run like liquid serpents across wood. Just after mid-afternoon, horns from the south announced new arrival. Lances bobbed along Snowy Ridge, Manderley harbor guards hauling sledges of obsidian crates. Behind them car-holed sleighs stacked with tar casks. Farther off a lumber chain of birch logs cut from Risewell forests. The wounded cheered weakly. Supplies poured to the front, fueling frantic work. Near dusk, Howland Reed emerged from a swamp sled bearing a small, gnarled figure swathed in moss cloak. Eyes luminous gold. A child of the forest. Gasps rippled. The being surveyed the hastily built barrier, then spoke in liquid, lilting speech none but Howland understood. He translated. The dawn tree sees night roots stir. Light must meet them in song. The child produced a pouch of shimmering black sand, ground obsidian glimmering with flecks of red jasper. Howland explained, "Scatter it in the flames, let it ride the smoke." The dust would cling to white flesh and slow their knitting. Lyanna accepted the pouch with a nod, feeling weight of ages in its silken heft. She bowed to the child. Small clawed fingers brushed her brow. A blessing? Or perhaps a farewell. By sundown the barrier stood a jagged palisade 20 feet high, thick as a barn door, soaked with tar till it glistened. Behind a trench brimmed with pitch, ready to ignite. Archers lined scaffolds, redstone arrowheads knocked. Horn watchers shivered on the parapet of broken ice. Twilight bled purple-gray, and with it cold beyond ordinary winter seeped across the plain. The enemy emerged not as scattered whites, but as a phalanx. Ranks of frost-armored dead guided by 6 slender figures whose crowns of icicle spires jutted like antlers. They raised blades of smoke glass, pointing at the breach. Behind, the wyvern swooped again, its wounded breast oozing blue sparks. A roar of silence heralded their advance. No battle cry, only the hiss of snow beneath dead feet. Lyanna took her place upon a timber platform above the trench. At her side Benjen stood with the horn, Ned with ice, John Aaron gripping Eagle's talon. In the trench, torches waited. One throw would ignite the wall. But timing mattered. Burn too soon and flame would die before the enemy reached. Too late and whites might breach through unburned gaps. They waited until shadows cracked 30 paces away. Then Lyanna lifted her sword. Flame touched obsidian's seam. The edge glowed amber red. "Loose," she whispered, and archers fired. Obsidian-tipped shafts hissed into the mass. Blue eyes winked out. Bodies crumbled like burnt paper. Still, they came. "Again," she said. Another volley. When the first frost giants lumbered to the outermost stakes, she flung her arm downward. Torches arced. Pitch trench whooshed. Fire erupted along base, rushing upward as oil-soaked laths caught. Reed's obsidian powder swirled through sparks like night snow. The wall burned white-hot. Heat blasted faces. Ice crystals exploded into hissing steam. Whites threw themselves at flame, only to ignite, staggering like torches. Yet behind them, the crowned lieutenants wove arms in unison, and curtain walls of cold wind burst forward, blasts that snuffed sections of blaze. Where fire faltered, whites tumbled through, flinging smoldering limbs over the charred stakes. "Rekindle," Ned roared. Pitch carriers dashed, upending buckets. Stannis's tar burned thick, but the cold wind spun microstorms, freezing droplets mid-air. The barrier flickered uncertain. Lyanna snatched the obsidian horn from Benjen. She climbed the lattice, ignoring splinters biting palms, and perched atop blazing timbers. Heat seared hair edges. Smoke choked. She pressed the horn to lips and blew. The third call rang deeper than the last. Its resonance rippled across flame and frost alike. Where fires dimmed, they flared. Where ice winds howled, they curled inward, twisting into whirlpools of snow that dripped liquid water before boiling to mist. The crowned lieutenants recoiled, ice crowns fracturing. One raised his blade as if to strike the sound itself, but cracks shot through his crystalline torso. He burst apart in a shower of shards, his whites within a dozen steps collapsing still. The other lieutenants hesitated. Dragons of Aurora seethed overhead. Frostbite reared beneath the platform, whinnying. Lyanna's lungs burned, yet she drew deeper breath, blowing again and again until the horn's note merged with her heart's pulse. Somewhere behind, Narbert chanted syllables of High Valyrian. The child of the forest raised twig arms, eyes blazing gold. The wyvern beat wings against invisible force, shrieking. The arrow wound beneath its breast split wider, guts of sapphire ice spilling. Benjen hurled a short spear lanced with dragon glass. The weapon punched through membrane, lodging in the creature's skull. A burst of violet light erupted as the wyvern tumbled, smashing onto the plain, carving trenches of slush, then grew still. Its rider, a crystallized wraith, screeched once before arrow fire riddled it to dust. With their aerial terror fallen and one lieutenant destroyed, the white host faltered. Yet still hundreds pressed, flames catching bone. Behind them, deeper shadows stirred. Massive shapes, perhaps more giants or beasts yet unseen. Jon Arryn climbed the platform to brace Lyanna. Blood trickled from his ear where concussive sound ruptured vessels. He held her waist as she lowered the horn, lungs ragged. "Enough," he murmured. "You'll tear yourself apart." "Not yet," she ground out. Still they come. Far across the ice plain, a horn answered, hoarser, deeper. Another and another. 3 blasts in quick succession. Night's watch hail. From the west ridge, black-cloaked riders thundered. Castle Black Levy led by Lord Commander Jor Mormont himself. Flanked by surviving rangers, they charged into the undead flank with torches chained to long flails, each sweep spewing gouts of burning oil. White spun, trapped between 2 firefronts. Lyanna's army surged through gaps, swords high. She leapt down, heedless of burning embers cascading around. Frostbite carried her between pyroclasts, hooves splashing molten snow. With Ned and Benjen, she crashed against the white's exposed side. Their blades rose and fell. Dragon glass shattered hollow rib cages, severed spines laced in hoarfrost. Lord Risden Glover thrust forward, great axe cleaving. Manderly heavy infantry formed tortoise, pushing whites into the barrier's hottest blaze. Harsh white steam billowed until nothing remained but stumps of charcoal bone. At the center of the field, 2 remaining lieutenants advanced, ice blades leaving ruts of rime. One locked onto Lyanna, expression unreadable behind panes of winter glass. It raised a hand. Frost condensed into spiked javelins hovering mid-air, then flew. She ducked. Benjen deflected one with his shield, obsidian-lined rim fracturing the projectile into glitter dust. Another spike pierced Frostbite's flank. The mare screamed, collapsing. Lyanna rolled clear, landing on knees. Pain flared across thigh, but she scrambled upright, sword ready. The lieutenant strode closer. Heat of near fires melted thin streams down its armor, yet no flesh showed beneath. It lifted its ice sword. Ned leapt, intercepting. Ice clashed against frost blade. Valyrian steel rang like chimes. Sparks flew. The impact cracked a lieutenant's sword. Once, twice, then shattered. Ned wrenched upward, cleaving torso diagonal. The figure split. Shards tinkled to ground. The last lieutenant turned, perhaps to retreat. Arryn flung a throwing knife of dragon glass. It struck between spine plates. The figure froze, joints creaking, then collapsed in fragments. With lieutenants gone, whites jerked as if puppet strings snipped. They dropped where standing, limbs thrashing before stillness. In their wake, frost vapors dispersed. Silence descended. An unnatural pause filled by the roar of burning barrier and ragged breaths of living soldiers. Lyanna staggered to frostbite. The mare lay shuddering, black spike lodged to the hilt. She knelt, stroking sweat-slicked neck. Frostbite's eyes rolled, breath came in wet bubbles. Sobs gathered, but she steadied hand. Benjen knelt opposite, meeting her gaze. Wordless, he slid his dagger beneath the mare's ear. Mercy, swift. Frostbite sighed once, stilled. Lyanna bowed head, tears crusting to ice on lashes. Horn sounded again, victory this time. She rose, sword limp in fist. Across the field, survivors gathered bodies, both human and undead, piling them for pyres. Mormont approached, face smoke-smeared, bare sigil ragged. "Your horn saved us," he rumbled. She shook head. "Memory saved us," she whispered. "We burn the rest, then we rebuild stone, ice, and fire wall together." All-night pyres blazed under the comet's glare. Ash flakes drifted like dark snow on pale ice. The child of the forest sang quiet laments in a tongue older than men. Reed wept silently. Norbert etched glyphs around the breach, inscribing circles of dragonglass dust. He said they would slow further fracturing. Engineers quarried ice blocks from collapsed towers to buttress the crack. Manderly men poured tar in seams, lit fires within stone hollows, fusing ice to glassy hardness. Morning found Lyanna slumped against a felled tree trunk, sword propped like a crutch. Ned joined, eyes hollow but clear. "We held," he said. She exhaled steam. "They will return. But we've proven they can be broken. We know their weakness." Her gaze wandered to field where Frostbite's body smoldered among smaller pyres. Yet each victory costs. Ned's hand tightened on hers. "What now, Lady of Winterfell?" "We forge a realm that remembers," she answered. "One that unites fire and ice." Across the breach, first golden rays of genuine dawn crested, staining snowfields pink. Heat kissed cheeks, numb from wind. Survivors gathered silently, staring east, perhaps seeing sunrise anew. Lyanna rose, wobbling, then straightened. Benjen limped over, offered her the obsidian horn. She accepted, inspecting scorched rim hairline cracked from overuse. "I doubt it will sound again," Benjen said. "It needn't," she replied. "Its song dwells in us now." She lifted the battered horn high. Living voices answered, a low roar growing until it echoed down the glacier, over half-rebuilt ramparts, into pine valleys far south. From those valleys, ravens already winged, carrying tales of she-wolves and frost giants, of living fire walls, of the night itself recoiling before mortals saw. Within months, kings and councils would argue. Scribes would misname heroes. Bards would sweeten verses with impossible gloss. But here, on splintered ice where dawn touched the coldest edge of the world, truth breathed. Ordinary hearts had stood against forgetting and sung memory bright. Lyanna walked the charred plain until ash-coated boots, visiting each fallen bannerman, each burned white pile, each lavender-armored corpse of false lions found melted down to brittle shards. She gave silent thanks. She gave silent warnings. Then she set her eyes northward, where mountains stabbed the sky behind veils of everlasting snow. Somewhere beyond, deeper darkness lurked, waiting for human resolve to dim. It would not find them wanting. She sheathed her sword with a click like distant thunder, pivoted south toward the bustle of rebuilding, and felt within her chest a steady beat, fire and frost tempered, stronger than either alone. A heartbeat for Winterfell. For Jon Snow, sleeping far behind stone walls. For Robert's lost dreams. For Rhaegar's broken harp. For every face that forced history forward by sheer refusal to fall silent. That thrum guided her steps toward new dawn. And dawn, fragile but real, gilded broken ice in rose gold, promising that memory, carried by horncall, by love unburied, by stone that bore wolf sigils, would flame against night as long as even one she-wolf drew breath to howl.